You know we talk that stick talk, that stick talk. I'm about to fuck this cash up.
All right, we're back. Stick Talk, episode number 7. We got Jay Mack back in the house, co-host. What's up, Jay? How you doing?
I'm good. I'm doing. I got Red Bull. I'm ready to go.
Right on. And then we got our guest tonight, Mr. Adam. Is it Drzayich?
Drzayich. It's like saying Drzayich real fast. Yeah, it's all good. Everybody going.
So I butchered that one, but because I'm pretty sure that's what you pronounced his last name, was it not, Jay?
Yeah, I was wrong.
It's all good.
Yeah, there we go. It's all good.
Look, it's spelled like Dr. Drzayich, and it's pronounced like Drzayich. So when you get a couple cocktails in your hand and you go, "Hey, Drzayich," that's pretty freaking close. So everything's good. Drzayich.
Okay, I'll just be calling you Adam anyway. So
that's what everybody calls me anyhow.
Yeah, that, or we'll call you Shock Master or the Shock Whisperer. Or
I don't know about that, but we've done some shocks in our day, so
that's why we got Adam on tonight. Is we want to talk to Adam a bit with on the shocks, because Adam's got tons of experience when it comes to shocks, and Jay's actually working with Adam now. So I know we've mentioned on a couple of the other podcasts about Jay getting into the shock business, and him and Adam are working side by side. So Adam's going to teach him everything he knows, and Jay will eventually be a shock master as well, right?
Yeah, well, when you figure out everything I know, we think we passed that point about 3 or 4 days ago. So we're exploring new territory now.
Oh, wow.
It's scary.
Yeah.
So what do you guys got that you're working on right now?
Oh, well, so we got some struts we're doing for an Australian Pro Stock car. We got to put those things together this week. We got an engine for that thing, so we're basically turnkey in the car and then putting it in a container, and that thing's heading overseas. So that's priority number 1 for next week, I guess. And then whatever else we're doing, we got some new stuff in the works that we got to start researching and figuring out how to build shocks for different style cars. You know, old James over there, he's keeping me busy right now. So
yeah, shout out to Ryan Garage Built. We did some talking today, and man, when this drops, you'll know. We can't talk about it right now because there's definitely some stuff going on elsewhere that I don't want to mention, but we got to be on our game and make sure we make some stuff happen. So let the product speak for itself.
Yeah, it was a wild conversation. We went down a rabbit hole, and then all of a sudden it was all about all kinds of components, which was pretty badass, actually. Those guys seem like it's going to be a really good deal for everybody, including most of all the customers. But you know, we're here to make money at this deal, so if we can provide a product and a service, and I think we're going to kill it. So I think it'll be good.
I know when I was down there the other week and got a chance to meet you, and you gave me a tour of the shop there. It's Chicago Connection, right?
Right.
It's the name of the shop that you guys are working out of there. And I know you guys showed me a few of other things that you've got in the works for like S550 and different chassis for not necessarily just shocks, but other components. So that's pretty exciting. It seems like you guys are very dialed in and getting some new stuff to market, and
we're going to try. This is going to, it's, you know, it's really weird for me because normally we always kept everything to ourselves. You know, I come from like a NHRA Pro Stock background, so it's like we don't share anything. You know, you have what you have, and that's your advantage, and you lock that in with everybody. You know, and you don't share it. So some of the stuff we did was really crude, but it was effective. So we kept going with it. Well, now I'm having to shift gears. It's like, all right, we need to make things A, work, B, work so well that idiots can use them, because let's face it, some of these people, you just don't know what they're gonna get.
Yeah,
that guy right there. But you know, you got to make it pretty, and you got to do engineering on the side of it. That's a whole nother realm that I'm just not used to. You know, we're used to welding shit together and just sending it down the road or send it to the racetrack and let's see what happens. Well, now we got a few more P's and Q's going. So it's a different animal, but I like it. I think it's going to be fun.
So when did you get into the shock world or shock business? Like how long you been dealing with the shafts?
It was 2003 or 4, I think it was. I had a roommate that I was living with back in Seattle, and he worked on a stock car team. Kind of a local deal, but a big deal. You know, it was like they had a shock dyno, they had all the stuff that they had that they needed to succeed really and be a kind of a top tier national. I think they ran late models, and then they ran like some other NASCAR touring series. But anyhow, I watched him do some stuff, and I'm like, that is the coolest damn thing I've ever seen in my life. Like they drill little holes and pistons and change shims and then put them on the dyno and do them again. So in 2005, I went to work for Warren Johnson on his pro stock team, and I walked in and there was a shock dyno there that never got used. Like they tested things on it, but we weren't building a lot of shocks at the time, and probably. God, it was probably 10 years before I started there. They had a really big deal with Penske. And so they had, I mean, bins of shocks and shims and seals and tools, and nobody was touching them. So I was like, well, I'm gonna try this. So I sat down after work, and just started experimenting with things and breaking shit and trying things. And Warren would come up behind me and he'd laugh. He goes, "Yeah, I did that before. Yeah, I know how that happened. Oh yeah, yeah. Well, try this, do this." And then, I mean, there was probably a good solid 2 years that I was screwing with the shock dyno and building shocks. We never bolted one on the car because we had shit that worked fairly decent, and nobody, we weren't going to vary from it. And I'll never forget St. Louis. I think it was, yeah, St. Louis, and there was maybe something else. I can't remember what the race was before, but we didn't qualify at that race, and we always did different shit. So I jumped in the truck after that day and drove straight back to the shop. And Warren said, "You do whatever you want to do to that race car. Get those Penske shocks. Let's get them on the car. We're gonna go testing in Bristol." I'm like, okay. That was on Saturday night. Tuesday night, I loaded the car in the trailer the way I wanted it and the way I think the way we talked about it, at least. I mean, obviously it wasn't all me, but we went to Bristol and we started making shock adjustments on these new Penske shocks that we had. And it was like, holy crap, like we're running faster than everybody. And we had power, but we didn't have, like, we weren't known for our chassis prowess, that's for sure. Like it was get it to the 60 foot and out mile an hour everybody out the back. That was just how they always did it. Well, pretty soon we were 60 footing, and then we were traveling through the middle and everything was going really well. And we went back to the shop, and then I had a family thing back in Seattle, so I flew back out there and then came back, and we went straight to Bristol for the race. And I think we qualified number one for that race, if I'm not mistaken. I think we qualified on the pole, and then yeah, we lost first round, but whatever. But it was just that at that point right there, it was like, all right, and I think I'm onto something now, and I know that I can do this, and that was like the turning point of all. So I think it was in 2006 or seven, maybe was when all that really happened. Maybe even no, it was '08 actually. It was '08. That was when it was. But anyhow, that was when I knew, like, okay, well, maybe I can do this shit, and I just understood how it works between years of study and data, and just working and understanding the chassis, understanding the car, and really learn a lot about what not to do. So that's a big deal. But then you
Yeah.
stumble onto something, and you kind of hold on to it, and everything goes well. But yeah, that was kind of where it all got started. So
Yeah, and it's pretty crazy and in depth because you never really realize until you get around someone like yourself that's into building the shocks and customizing shocks that there's even such thing as a shock dyno. Because even when I was down there to visit you guys in Chicago, I never once in my life would have thought that there'd be a dyno for shocks. But there I was standing in that room with all those shocks and that dyno, and it just goes to show really with all components to the car. You got expertise on every component, right? And
sure.
I do know one thing with suspension. When I really got into this no prep thing, I reached out to my buddy Mike Corley from Sinister Performance, and I was talking to him about putting a Holly in my car and being able to pull timing and all that sort of stuff to manage power to get it down the track. Because the first time out, it was an absolute disaster. But I was on factory struts in the front with just lowering springs and no adjustability at all, right? So I messaged him and I'm like, what's going to help me get this car to go down the track? And he said to me, and to this day I still tell people that are getting into this is suspension is key. If you don't have your suspension dialed in, you're not going to go anywhere. So I took that and I went out and bought the double adjustable shocks, bought the double adjustable struts, coilovers for the front, and then really started realizing how important it is. But it did take a bunch of messing around to get it dialed in. But honestly, without shocks, as I'm sure you can share, that you're not going to get a car down the track, especially on a no prep, right? Like I know they do say like on sticky tracks. You can band-aid, shock settings and that sort of stuff, but especially on bad prep, I'm sure you can probably, maybe attest to that it's even more important to have the right shocks and settings to get a car down.
Yeah, but you know what? It's all part of a package. Like you can bolt a pair of $20,000 rear shocks on a pile of shit chassis, and the thing isn't going to work. You put these shocks on the car, and you think, man, this is going to be the end all cure all, and it goes out and bounces and does all kinds of stuff because the geometry of the rear suspension or your weight distribution isn't right, and there's nothing you're going to be able to do to that shock to make it work. The shocks are a part of the package. I tell everybody that. It's like I can sell you a set of Penske rear shocks. They're going to be the nicest stuff you can buy, really. You're going to spend $4,000 on a pair. It's going to have air adjusters. It's going to have all this stuff on it, but it's not going to mean that your car is going to be fast. You still have to do all those things. You still have to manage power. You still have to set everything up to get, to get the benefits out of all of it. I mean, I say that, and I'm a shock guy, and I drive a race car for a family here locally. In the back of that, some strange double adjustables, baby. Like, because I know how to make the car work. I can move 4-link. I can move weight. I can do all this stuff. And yeah, are we limited to the shock? Yeah, we're pretty limited to it. But for what the car does, it's fine. And you're not going to drive through tire shake. You're not going to do a lot of things with big tires that goes fast. I mean, this thing goes relatively fast. It's 420s, 14s in the 8th mile. But it works. It's fine, but you definitely need a good shock. You need a quality part that what it is, and that you don't have a dead one. I think that's a big deal with a lot of these is people get things out of the box and they assume that just because they're new, they're good and their valves somewhat close, or they're matched to the other one. We do a lot where people just send us their shocks and we'll put them on the dyno. It's like, oh. Well, that one's valved. Well, I mean, even if it's not valved, they're supposed to be valved the same. They have the same internal components, but they don't act the same. And these lesser expensive shocks are that way a lot. So you kind of got to pick your poison, whatever. But like I said, the shock is part of a big package. It's not the cure-all, but it's important, but it's not the cure-all.
Yeah, super important, I think.
A good example of that. I mean, Adam, I don't know if you want to share the New England story you were telling me, but I know that was a good example of the whole package from what you were telling me about how nobody can get down in the car you're working on when A to B.
Yeah, I was telling him, we were no prep racing out with the car, and I'm not a big shit talker. Like I'm very quiet. I go up there. I'm a data driven guy. I'm a notes. That's the way I am. And you'll never see me go up to somebody and go, get you some of that, motherfucker. It's just not, it's not me, because I have been on the other side and I have been the one that has shit talked, and these people, you just get your ass handed to you. And then you feel like a little clown and you walk off the starting line. I've been there when I was younger. So anyhow, we go to we're at this no prep event, and they used to, at these no prep events, they'd basically spread grease sweep, oil dry all over the racetrack to dumb the racetrack down. And so it was a challenge all the time to get down early. And then it would come around and everything was fine. Well, we go out there for the first run and nobody's getting down. And this thing is everywhere. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, all right, watching a couple cars in front of us. We get up there, and right before the thing goes down the racetrack, I slide under the back, make a couple of clicks on the shock, and try some things. And this thing just goes brr, 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 right down the racetrack, A to B. And I turned around and I just looked at everybody standing there. Everybody's like, "How in the fuck did you do that? Like, what happened there?" And it's like, it's the package. It's the package. It's the whole thing. I didn't go up there try and go 370 on a freaking racetrack. That it probably went 4 flat or something, and it was slow, but it went down. And it's everything, like that's the attention to details that it takes to run when people think you can't, or most people aren't. They're not paying attention to the details. So shocks are a part of the details. Like those couple clicks, did it make or break me? No, but I guarantee it made it better. So
100%.
Yeah, so there's a lot of little things about them that I guess people don't realize that it could be it could be an adjustment to make. So
yeah,
but yeah, I may or may not have talked shit walking off the starting line that day.
Yeah.
I was mildly proud of what I did.
That one was definitely earned for sure to be able to talk a little shit.
It was fun.
So,
That was a good day.
and I'm sure a lot of guys are going to be curious too. They're like, well, this guy's a chassis tuner and shocks, but what does he know about stick shift? And I know, as you said, the early days, you were in pro stock, and that involved a lot of clutch work. And
That's all it was clutch.
Yep. Yep. And you were telling me about how you used to redo, you had the clutch machine. You used to resurface the clutches and recondition them and all that. You mind going into a little bit of detail on the clutch work you used to do and kind of clutch selection and kind of theory over that?
Yeah. So pro stock clutches and production clutches, apples and oranges. Like they're very different. Honestly, I have very minimal experience with a diaphragm style clutch or something that goes into a street car. I could look at it and go, huh, well that's cool. But like our levers, our clutches had titanium. It was all titanium or had an aluminum cover or something on it, and we had different levers that we produced or whatever, and bolted counterweight on it, had static base pressure. You set the ring height of the clutch, which is basically the distance between the pressure plate and the front and the top cover, and then that just basically set your spring preload on that, and you moved it with disc thickness. That was kind of your constant. You always kept that the same. Lever angles, pin geometry, one to the other, because there's two pins that anyhow the lever rotated on. I go into it for days, but we actually, when I was at WJ's, we built our own clutch, and we ran it quite a bit, and it worked out pretty well. And I had very little to do with it, so I'm not like nothing that I had to do, but I mean, we helped with that. Like we made our own levers. We did a lot of things that I'm sure other people were doing, but maintenance wise, we had a clutch grinder. We had a Van Norman, diamond wheel that we would grind the clutches on. We had a coating on it it was called a TMT coating. I think it's a supersonic blasted like a turbine coating that they use on aircraft, and we would coat the surfaces with it. And that shit was diamond hard. Like it was so hard. You could put it on a belt sander and push as hard as you could, and it wouldn't touch it. It was amazing. You had to grind it with a diamond wheel. It was pretty wild. But that kind of clutch stuff. The clutch is everything in a pro stock car. Well, not everything. It's a part of the package too. But if the clutch isn't right, car's not going to go down the racetrack. It'll bog. It'll do this. So you got to slide it off the starting line. Unlock it between gears, get the thing going. The clutch was as a critical part as the carburetors were in those days, as the clutches were, as the transmission ratios and gear ratio, the rear gear ratios and shock settings, and I mean, it's like I said, all a big package. But the clutch stuff, I have a lot of experience with it, but not so much production clutches. So when James and I were talking about that stuff, I'm like, man, what can we do with your clutch to like make it do this or make it do that? Or what if we did this to the throwout bearing? What if we did that? It's like, "Ooh, yeah, we could do that. Well, we could try that. Well, I don't know." So that's I know this summer is actually going to be fun, I think, for both of us, because it's going to be shit that I don't really know about, but I've got a lot of experience in, I guess, more advanced stuff that we could maybe apply to some of this stuff. And I don't know, see what happens. May totally step on our dicks. Probably will, but at least it'll be fun.
Can't be anything worse than I've already done to myself.
Yeah.
So that clutch stuff was before you got in depth with the shock stuff then, right?
Yeah. Because my family had a pro stock car. We ran a few races a year with it, and so I understood clutches a little bit from there. We kind of learned about it, and then once I went to work for Warren, obviously I learned way more. But yeah, but everything was clutch. Our family car was clutch. Yeah, everything. That car I was telling you about with the strange double adjustables in the back, that's a clutch car. It's got a Lenco 5-speed and a 10-inch Ram dual disc clutch. It's just kind of old, but they said it's what we got, and those people have it, and we have a lot of fun with it. So yeah, so I'm still kicking the left foot, leaving the starting line.
Oh yeah.
But
so when you're building shocks for stick shift cars, are you using any different valving? Like, is that something that's part of the process when someone calls you and says, "Hey, this is my setup. It's a stick shift car." Like, what's that change when you're building the shock?
There's a couple of things that changes, but most of the thing that changes is the high speed rebound on the shock. That a clutch car, when you sidestep the clutch, is going to be much more violent than letting off a trans brake. A clutch car is a mechanical hit, where a trans brake is, it does hit, but you've got the torque converter in there that is multiplying torque, but it doesn't hit like a clutch car does. So a lot of times a clutch car will have a lot more instant, like the initial separation of the shock. So it's trying to bury the tire into the ground. You'll have a ton more of that on a clutch car than you would an automatic. So typically you take your high speed rebound, you beef that, shims or, whatever it is, different piston. But typically it's just shims. You add a little more shim to it. So that high speed rebound isn't as it's not as violent, I guess. Get control a little better. So, but then the other side of it is the low speed compression. Sometimes that low speed compression on a clutch car, because you can hit it and spin the tire, you can get away with running a lot less low speed compression on a clutch car, especially a small tire clutch car like a production style car, because you're not multiplying torque with the converter. So you're not as, it's just a different aggression to the tire, I guess you could say. So there's it, and it's not much. You're talking, I don't know, maybe 20% more high speed rebound, and maybe you could get away with 10-15% less low speed compression just to try and get the tire gripping more as it drives out. But it's minor. It's minor. And a lot of times guys will just, you can just adjust it that differently. You don't have to really necessarily build them different, but we try and tailor things to the customer, to their car. So we give them a little target adjustment range to start with. So we adjust the valve and keep it in that target adjustment range. And then they can do what they need to do afterwards based on track conditions, data, weather, whatever.
Yeah. And I guess the thing with stick cars too, and I've seen it a couple of times when I've been running my car, is, you get the car unloading too, and then heading like between the shifts with your clutch and in between the shifts. And that's a tough one too, because you've got all that load and then it's off and back on again. And it's like,
right,
not really the same issue you run into with an automatic car where it's pretty smooth. You got that fluid coupler, right? The torque converter to keep you nice and smooth running out. But I guess with
even
the
if
pro
it's
stock,
not unloading, even if it's not unloading, the just like a faceplated transmission that you just rip it into second gear or something, it is a completely different shock than an automatic. It just hammers it. And if you have like a faceplated transmission where you shove the clutch in, pull the gear, and dump it again, I mean, you're basically launching again. So I've got some ideas on some shock stuff for that. We do air adjusters on things, and we can tie those into timers or like load cells on a gear on the gear, like on a shifter or something. I don't know. I've got some crazy ideas, and it's probably stuff people have done before and just say, it doesn't do shit, but maybe it does, who knows? So we'll have to test some stuff this year.
Yeah, that was a big one that I learned. Just in the first few days of working with you, I wasn't even aware of like the air adjusters where, like you were telling me about how you can change starting line conditions and adjust ride height as the car goes down the track, which I'm sure now that I'm bringing this up, there's going to be a lot of people that watch this are going to be like, what the hell is he talking about? Would you mind going a little detail about like the adjustable spring perches and stuff like that, like you taught me on?
Sure. Yeah. So there's a couple different air adjusters and in this whole thing. One is like they call it an air eyelet, and it's a Penske deal. Menser has some stuff out that's really neat too. He's came out with some stuff for the Afcos that are pretty badass. But we've been doing the Penske stuff like that since I started doing Penske stuff, and I know before that it was done. So it's nothing new. But basically, you get with this air eyelet, you get two different settings, and you can basically put air pressure to the eyelet, and then that gives you an air on setting. And then when you dump the air pressure off, it moves the needle in the eyelet, and you get an air off setting. So you can leave stiff, shift it soft as you go down a racetrack. Sometimes we leave soft and shift it stiff. We can do that in the fronts and on the rears. And then years and years ago, we did some stuff with pneumatic spring perches, and whatever, we didn't commit enough time to it to make it what it could have been, I guess. And we just didn't deal with it. Well, there's a company out there, PRS. They are in Pennsylvania, and they patented a really nice it's like an air chamber, but basically it's a pneumatic spring perch. So you can put air to it and it will lift the car up. They've got a couple different models, and we use those on a lot of our stuff. And they work. They're really nice parts. Really nice parts. Penske itself actually has air springs that we've tested too, and to do the same thing with. You take the coil springs off and you put basically an air chamber on. You put a static air pressure in it, and then we have a canister that moves more volume into it to raise the car, or you can take volume away to lower the car. So, um, just stuff that you test and you find out what it needs. But I mean, it's all that stuff's out there. This is nothing earth shattering or new, but when you're dealing with street cars, those guys, you don't know what you don't know. And I mean,
No.
like you said, you came into this and saw a shock dyno. Well, I mean, that shock dyno I have is, shoot, that thing's 20 something years old now. So it's not cutting edge at all. People have been doing it forever. And yeah, so now it's just trickle down, I guess. When the low hanging fruit get picked, people start looking at other places, and I think that's what's going on in the streetcar world right now.
Yeah, you really only know what you know, because I seen a set of those too when I was down there. You guys were showing me the air perch there to adjust for the coil, right? For the air for the coil, which runs usually off CO2. And I know there's a certain person and YouTuber that was just doing a video, and your name was actually dropped, and he's got that component on his car. And sounds like it works pretty good. Anyways, I know he moved him over. He was changing some stuff on his suspension, and actually moved those air perches over to what he's trying out now. So
yeah, I mean, like I said, this is nothing new, and it's not like I built the damn things. I use them. They're a tool in our toolbox, and we sell them, and they work great. They're a really nice part. So we actually, when we were running them in an NHRA Pro Stock car, they were badass. Like they were awesome pieces. What they would do is get them going down to racetrack, and you get into like third gear or whatever, and you drop the back of the car down. You'd lower it because the tire would grow and it would put the spoiler up in the air. So you drop the back of the car down to overcome the tire growth and get the spoiler as low as possible to take all the drag off the thing. And I mean, they were some of the least expensive ways to pick up, a mile an hour. Mile an hour was huge. Well, you bolt these things on, and they're whatever, $2,500, and all of a sudden you pick up a mile an hour. It's like, holy shit! Like that was awesome. So, but like I said, they're not mine. I didn't build them. These guys over at PRS build them, and like I said, they're badass.
But just that technology, the streetcar guys like myself, you don't typically see stuff like that. So it's kind of cool when you do see this sort of stuff, right?
Yep, definitely.
Fast guys are actually using.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's the name of the game. They devote a lot of money to that stuff, and so the money trickles down. Basically, the technology trickles down. So
yeah,
and that's the other thing too that I've been meaning to ask you. Again, I don't know if you want to get into that side of things, but pro stock versus the other side of racing that you're involved in. Again, it's up to you if you want to mention it, but I was always curious on how much crossover of knowledge goes between both of those, because obviously pro stock, clutch car, naturally aspirated, obviously a different weight, highly prep surface versus, like you're saying, and the other side of the racing that you were doing with, obviously a less than favorable track condition, and obviously screw chargers and pro chargers and stuff like that, kind of being the go-to power adder. How much overlap, and honestly, which one do you prefer more than the other, or is it both kind of like they have their own special place?
They have their own special place, I guess. But so like, it's no secret, I was tuning cars for Kye Kelley. We did the Street Outlaws stuff and tuned Lizzie Musey stuff for a little while. And so the crossover, there was really nothing you could compare to both of them. Stick shift, prepped racetrack, trying to drain everything out of every run you can, to no racetrack, way more power than you can use, and trying to be creative to make it work. But I say that there was not a lot of crossover, but it was all the same. Like you're trying to get every ounce of performance out of both of them. How you go about it is just different. You don't run. Well, start by saying this. I really like the no prep stuff because the no prep stuff had no recipe. There was no proven recipe like a pro stock car had. A pro stock car, you always know where, about where you ran the four link. You always know about where the weight distribution was. You always know this. The chassis are very, very similar between everybody. The no prep stuff, there was none of that. So you could think completely outside the box and give the car exactly what it wanted. If you knew what it wanted, like if you could interpret what the car was telling you, you could excel well. And I feel like that's why I excelled over there, was because I could watch the car and go, oh yeah, the four link's too short and the shocks, it's not rotating. So because the four link's too short, we don't have enough weight on the rear, or the shock's too tight or too loose. And then you kind of look at the run and you look at the data and you're like, I wonder if this will work. Let's move the weight over here, and then let's turn those pneumatic perches on. Let's lift the back of the car. Let's do this, or let's put a really big wicker bill on the back and get the car to extend, and then push the car back down with the wicker bill. So I really liked that. That was like my forte, because I could just sit there and dream stuff up. But they were extremely similar in the case where data mattered. Like if you had to keep excellent notes, and you had to keep, you had to analyze data. I have spreadsheets. I have, on my iPad, I've got, I was telling you guys about how, when we go street racing, I had a little piece of paper that I would color on the ground to see how much surface area it had, and it's all
Yeah.
those stupid things that most don't think about, that you're trying to put numbers on. You're trying to put numbers on a track surface. You're trying to say, is that track a 6 or is it a 10 for grip? And if it's a 6, what am I going to do to the car to get the extra 4 numbers out of it to get to a 10? Like, am I going to move weight? Am I going to lower tire pressure? Am I going to soften the shock, tighten the shock? Am I going to take power out, change gear ratios? Like, that was all the weird things that is exactly the same as pro stock. Because I guess I look at all the race cars like that. It doesn't matter if it's pro stock or junior dragsters. Like, I'm out here trying to figure out how to do it the best I can, and I use weird ways of doing it. But I mean, weird isn't wrong. If it works, it's not wrong. So that's the way I see it all. It's all the same, but it's all incredibly different.
Right on, right on. I think that's the
Yeah.
coolest part about racing, is that how much, like, there's one goal. Everybody has the same goal, right? Obviously, go out, run as fast as you can, run over the competition, get to that winner's circle. But there's so many different methodologies to get there. And there's especially in no prep, where there's, like you
Mhm.
said, pro stock, or like a lot of like the heads up bracket, like index stuff like that. There's a combo that is proven results as compared to no prep. There's different theories and ways to get to that same goal, where like everybody's kind of, for lack of a better term, you're throwing shit at the wall to see what sticks. And then once you do it enough, you, like you said, with the spreadsheets and data, where you're like, okay, now I know what the car is telling me, I can interpret it, and now I kind of know where our baseline needs to be, to where grow into it. We're like, okay, by the finals, you're like, we got this car dialed in A to B, it's on rails kind of thing.
Mhm. But it all starts with throwing shit at the wall. I mean, it's all an educated guess to start with, so you gotta do that first. But then you got to track the changes. You got to track the variables, because sometimes you don't realize that you made a amazing discovery and it didn't work because you were one thing off, one component off. And you kind of look through it and you're like, man, we did that, it didn't do anything, but we didn't do it when we did this. And then you put the two things together and it's like, oh, there we go. But if you didn't have the data to look back at that, yeah, you just don't see it. So
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
that's what I love about racing. That is my favorite thing about racing, is that it's a science experiment. I don't give a shit about the cars. I don't geek out over cars. I love them, but I don't geek out over them. Like, it's not my thing. Everybody says, "Oh man, how could you get rid of this car? That thing is your baby." It's like, screw that. It's a freaking pile of tubing. Like, yeah, we wadded it up. Okay, well, let's build another one. Yeah, it was a good car, but let's learn what we did there and build a new one. Because the science experiment continues. It's an evolution. But yeah, I love this shit.
Yeah.
That's my
And
favorite thing.
I'd really agree on that as well too. Like with the data and having those analytics, it goes a long way. Even with what I do, which is at such a small level and streetcar, and it's not no pro stock or anything like that. I still, like I've showed you guys, I've got a spreadsheet, just like Excel, but I use the Google or whatever Google Sheets it's called, and everything's in there: DA, temperature, all the shock settings, tire pressure settings, and that that has been a big help in getting my car to work. Right? It's just, and then making changes too, and you can probably maybe touch on this too. Is I found like making small changes, right, and not too many changes at once, because people will go under there and they'll turn every knob, and then they'll change the launch RPM and boost ramp, and then you're really, if something does work, you don't even know what it was out of those things that worked, right? So that's one thing that I found myself to kind of share with people watching too, is to kind of make smaller changes.
Absolutely. We make small changes. And when you're curious about something, you're trying to prove a theory, obviously you're not going to change anything but one thing. But when you get a big enough database, you can go, all right, well, I know because the racetracks like this, we need to take 0.2 of a pound of tire pressure out of it, because the track's getting worse or better, whatever it is. And then, with our big tire stuff, well, you get on the starting line, you do a burnout, and the thing, shit, all of a sudden the racetrack's there. Like, we're leaving on a stellar surface where we didn't think we were. Like, all right, I'm going to reach in the window. I'm going to give it 100 RPMs. I'm going to drop the wheelie bar down 1/8 of an inch, and you kind of go through all these things in your head of, all right, I know that like the first hit of the drive shaft is 1-to-1 with the launch RPM. So I know that racetrack's probably 100 RPM less. So you make that one small change to try and correct for the racetrack. And it's like, but to get it out and get that thing going faster, I don't know if I got enough power in it right now to get the tire spinning to our target RPM. So I'm going to drop the wheelie bar down and let it ride the wheelie bar and spin the tire a little bit, but keep it round and get moving, or else, because if it dead hooks, you're screwed. It'll, try and shake or drive over itself. So you learn that there's 4 or 5 little changes, and the changes that you can make. You learn that with the data. Like, you learn that with experience and data, where you said just the one change at a time, only when you're proving something. Because honestly, there's so many variables in the whole thing. Even if you change nothing, you're still not changing nothing. The track changes, the weather changes. There's things that way. So yeah, everybody, like, Kai used to watch me, and I just walk around and like touch this and move that, and take that 5 pounds from there and move it over here. And he's like, "What are you doing?" I was like, "Well, I'm trying to get this here, and I'm tweaking this and then doing that, and we're tracking it all." But just with experience, I know that, yeah, I can do these little changes, and I won't step on my dick. I mean, it's just it's going to help, but it's not going to be a complete 180 from where we were. So.
Yeah, and that comes back to like what you were telling me about. There's testing and then there's smart testing. Some guys go out there and I'm just gonna make licks and try to run a personal best, or just try to make sure it goes A to B. And then there's smart testing, where you're going out and trying shit and trying to learn, which is a big game changer. I mean, even eye opening for myself, where like, as soon as I get my car out for the first test session this year, it's going to be that mentality of now, like, well, I'm not just going out to see what am I going to run on this new setup. Get a baseline, and then, okay, let's try a different bar angle. Let's try a different shock valving. Let's try a different launch RPM, things like that, to kind of learn from it. Because, like you told me, is like, you got to have your data, and you don't get data by just, oh, I went on this road that's heavily prepped and I went A to B and I ran to this. That's just, you're going out for what? You're basically going to a testing tune.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. And that's it. I mean, I've learned more by going out to a test session and going slower, because I tracked the data and tracked what we were doing, and we slowed down 500s. It's like, okay, well, I know this one only slowed me down 1, and that one slowed me down 3, and this one slowed me down 1, so it's like, okay, well, there's our 5. So that 3, we're shit canning that idea. We're putting it on the back burner. We're tracking that we did it, and it didn't work the way we thought it would. So that's going away. And then you end up, you make one more run, put it back to 0, or go the exact opposite the way that you went, and you pick up a little bit. You're like, okay, well, I know that the direction I was going is not the way I wanted to go. So that's a successful day, because I proved that doesn't work. To me, that works. Obviously, you want to go faster, but you got to take the good with the bad. And the whole pro stock background comes back. 90% of the things we tried didn't work. So you, I'm pretty good with failure. You know, it's like, well, you got to fail to succeed.
You
So
have to be.
yeah, yeah, screw it. So I mean, all those shock, like I said, 2 years before we bolted a shock on that car at Warren's, and once we did it, it worked. And I was like, holy shit, okay. And I promptly screwed up a few pairs after that didn't work. But that one pair we had sitting on, sitting to the side, that was our standard at that point. So, you change it. Is it better or worse than what you had? It's better. Great. That's the new standard. Take the set you had, change some things about them. Are those better or worse than your new standard? No. Okay. Well, then keep working on them until they do get better. And it's just the evolution of it all. So
Yeah,
pretty wild.
absolutely. And as far as kind of, I know we had a brief conversation about it at work, but like four link theory and setting up your bar angles, what do you feel are like the biggest differences from, like, obviously, for one, a bias ply, slick style tire versus a radial tire, and then two, going from prep to no prep? What do you see are like the biggest changes, or kind of where ballpark of like where they fall in?
So bias ply to radial is, I mean, two completely different deals, because the whole thing with the bias ply is you've got your ball and yarn and rubber. Like it's yarn and rubber. The tire is. So that sidewall is the floppiest pile of shit you'll ever get. So you have to attack it differently. You have to be softer on that sidewall. So you're not going to run a severe uphill bar angle on the thing and blast the thing at the initial hit, drive it into the pavement, and then expect it to recover and pour more bite into it as you drive out. And it's almost exactly the opposite with a radial. Like, you can punish the dog shit out of a radial early and get the thing moving. And with an uphill bar, you pitch the weight off the back tire. The thing doesn't fold over and cup like a bias ply does. So, I mean, that's kind of, I guess that would be the biggest difference between the two. And then no prep to prep, it's the same theory, really. You have to manufacture your own bite. So what would be overhooked on a prep track isn't going to necessarily be overhooked on a no prep track. You know, Years and years ago, like these guys, I was telling you about, like a number for the racetrack and what you got to do to the car. Um, we were running a pro stock car. It was a mountain motor pro stock car, actually, and I came into this deal and they were struggling really bad with this new chassis. And the chassis builder came over to me and he's like, look, you got to run it different. I'm like, okay. So he kind of showed me what to do. And I'm like, shit, that makes a lot of sense. He goes, and he taught me. He says, look, you got to, you have a target grip number, we'll say. And we'll just give the number as a 10 because it's easy to get to. So not getting enough grip to make 11 or a 12 isn't a good thing, because you can get the tire pissed off by over gripping it as you can under gripping it. So if the track is a 6, like I was telling you before, and you need to get it to a 10 is your optimal grip number, well, you're going to make that in bar angle or shock settings or weight distribution. So you're going to pick up 4 points of so-called grip by doing that. And if the track's a 10 and you got that 4 points in, you're at 14, you got to figure a way to get all that shit out. So you don't need all the grip on the prep track, so there's always that optimal number. So anyhow, that's kind of the way I look at it and the way I've been taught. I mean, this is, I said, I'm no rocket science at this shit, but I do try and come at it, like I said, pretty analytical, and
Yeah.
take people's advice and weed the good advice with the bad. And I've been fortunate to be around a lot of really intelligent people, and that's the shit that they've taught me. So hopefully somebody learns that now.
Yeah, we're really hoping for it, because I know, especially in the Mustang world, I mean, Chris, you can attest to this, with how many times we see guys with, your 10R80 10-speed Mustangs, especially those guys. They love to do just the bias ply rear, stock size front tire, wheel combo. They launch on a prep track, and the tire is all up in the wheel well, stuffed all up inside the things. You look at the tire tracks in the 60-foot, and they're all wavy. They look like spaghetti noodles.
Mm-hmm.
And then they're complaining, well, the car is swaying everywhere. It's swaying everywhere, when they're mixing a radial full-size front with a bias ply rear. And unfortunately, that's a big thing with the modern cars and a lot of the street car guys, is they're not knowledgeable enough to realize, one, it's not the tires. I see a lot of guys complain like, oh, these Hoosiers suck, or these Mickeys suck. The car sways. It drives like shit. And then they go to the track and they think, man, I'm hooking hard. And you see the tire crushed all the way completely up in the wheel well, to the point I've seen some guys where, I mean, they're ripping pieces of the tire off because it's catching the inner like fender. And they're just like, man, I'm dead hooking. The car's hooking. And it's like, yeah, but that's not the way technically you want to go about it, especially on a highly prepped surface. They're just very uneducated.
Well, I mean, like we go back to it, they don't know what they don't know, I mean, uneducated, inexperienced, there's a lot of dumb people out there that are really freaking smart with race cars. And vice versa. There's a lot of stupid people, like, or incredibly intelligent people that couldn't hit their ass with either hand because they feel they're so intelligent, and they're going to go out there and make these changes because they can outsmart everybody. But the guy that's out there making one change at a time or 5 small changes or whatever, they're going to wear them out. So you don't know what you don't know. And I know a lot of these guys, this whole thing's a competition. Like, we're all egotistical fucks. So, I get it. Like, yeah, we're going to go out there. We're going to kill it. Yeah. Okay, cool. But that's not necessarily the things you have to do. So I don't know.
I think the tough thing is there's really not one answer for all, right? And there's so many different opinions out there. And that's something that I've learned in the short period of doing this is you can go talk to one guy and he's got, the things that work for his car. You go talk to the next guy, he's got something totally different. But, even when you have the same chassis, same car, there's still variables like with the weight of the person, like there's, or the conditions, the temperature outside the DA, right? Like there's, and that's the thing. And I think when people are trying to set up, their chassis and their suspension to work, they really just need to get a baseline for their car and start making adjustments from there. And like, yeah, you can take advice from others, but realistically, even like Jay and I, we've got the same chassis, but just because I give him my shock settings or bar angles doesn't necessarily mean that his car is going to get down or get down on the surface, because there's the different surfaces too, right? So it
gets me in the ballpark, but it's definitely our cars, even though they're the same car. I mean, we're 2 different weights. Our chassis setups are completely different. And yeah, your settings may get me in the ballpark, but like, if you look, like, for instance, I mean, last year I was running your settings and you went on that absolute kill streak, winning event after event after event. And then you see my car running and I'm like, dude, I'm fucking struggling. Like, I'm blowing the tire off to the 330 and I'm driving my life out of it. You would think it's some 1200 horsepower car the way I'm pedaling it. And I was on motor. I wasn't even spraying it yet. I couldn't get down the track. And, here you are with a TVS car and you're making it look like butter. It's smooth. And again, there's definitely not one answer for, especially with the street cars, because they're so, I know me and Adam had this conversation. I know I heard him talking about it. We're like, a chassis car, like a pro stock car, they're all set up kind of similar as compared to like your Mustang, my Mustang. Your car might have been built on a Tuesday. My car might have been built on a Friday when, the guys in their exoskeletons at the Ford plant were just like, I'm ready to go home, have a couple Bud Lights and fuck this car. If it gets done, it gets done, and there's the difference on how our cars handle. I mean, a big one, it's a customer that's been coming into us. He's got a older Skylark, and I've been telling him about it, is like, especially with A-bodies, like the older A-bodies are a prime example of that, where there are so many inconsistencies. Yes, it is an A-body frame. We're talking, 67 through 72 Chevelle, Skylark, GTO, those are the A-bodies. There's so many different inconsistencies on the frames, even though it's the same car, but just manufacturing defects, little different things that just like this one was done on a Tuesday, this one was done on a Thursday, and those little things will change how a part fits. It'll change how the car performs, and it kind of comes back down to, like they say, with hot rodding, you're always massaging something and trying to make something work.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but we don't see that very much in the race car side of it because, like you said, the cars are all very similar. They're jig chassis. The people that are building these cars are craftsmen. Like they have, they're just very good at what they do and they're very detail oriented. So yeah, we don't have that in race cars. Street cars, obviously, it's that way. We've all ran into cars that are just bastards and they don't respond to whatever. Sometimes it's just the inherent part of the chassis, or like it is, like you said, one was built on a Friday, one was built on a Monday. Yeah, it makes it all that much tougher, but at the same time, that much more rewarding when you figure it all out. That's the way I look at it, at least. That's I'm excited to start working on some streetcars to figure all these stupid things out. It's like, well, all right, yeah, well, your front end alignment's fucked up. That's why it's doing this or that, like, or or just dumb shit.
I'm
Like,
terrified for you to see my car. I'll be honest with you. I'm absolutely terrified.
I think I've seen your car before.
Oh man, once you get under it though, that's a different story. That's
Oh,
when you're
that's
like,
yeah, well.
why were you doing this? It's gonna be a
Well,
bad
that's
time there.
Look, I couldn't do any better. I just luckily I've got people that can afford to buy better things or whatever, but I don't have that stuff. So
Yeah. Do you feel like those inconsistencies, like we're talking about, is why you're seeing a lot of like, especially in small tire, where guys are moving to chassis cars now, or as
absolutely.
compared to like before, where guys were like, you have your stock style suspension Fox bodies, and now you got cars with full 25.5 chassis on them, and I mean they're full tube chassis race cars at this point with modified firewalls and everything like that.
Yeah, I think there's a couple things to that. Yes, consistency is huge, but nowadays it's so easy to make 3,000 horsepower, so you're not going to put a 3,000 horsepower Hemi in a stock floor pan, back half Mustang. It's just going to twist the thing apart. Could you get it to the finish line? Hell yeah. Yeah, you could do it, but it's not going to be, like you said, consistent, and it's not going to be safe, and it is going to be the most erratic pile of shit you'll probably ever have, So these guys are going to these big, full chassis cars because they need the structure in the race car to handle the power. And then, and it's lighter, obviously. If you don't have big frame rails, you can make this stuff lighter. So I think that's the biggest thing. It's just the power levels that we have now and how easy it is to get there. They have to have some sort of structure to put it in. So that's where it's leading.
Yeah, it's definitely. I know me and Chris were talking about that. What was that Friday when we had that phone call? We were talking about how you kind of end up in that rabbit hole where it's like you want to compete, but everybody's getting faster, and you got to kind of figure out like, shit, do I want to turn my car into a race car to stay competitive, or am I just happy
Hmm.
where I'm at and it kind of is what it is? But I mean, especially with a lot of these new motor combos. I mean, you look at the new LTs. They're so responsive to naturally aspirated mods where you're able to make 700-800 horsepower on a max effort, 416 stroker motor on these new LTs. Guys are pushing these little LT4 blowers into the sevens now. Obviously, the Coyotes being tried and true, and the power they make and can hold with the stock cast block. Obviously, the LS motors, which again, another tried and true. Yes, LS guys, I'm giving you guys a little compliment here. Take it and run with it. But LS guys, I mean, obviously those motors can work, and they've been proven a lot, especially in the small tire world, where guys are using like the combo I'm building with a stock Gen 3 block and Gen 4 internals, and that they're making 1,100-1,200 horsepower. And yeah, if it pops, it's like, okay, well, I'm under $5,000. That's where I'm going to give you LS guys shit. It's not $500, but you're about $5,000 in. They're like, okay, now I got to refresh this whole motor, but $5,000 compared to what, a dart block, an old small block Chevy, where small block Fords, where you're a long block at almost $20,000 already for something that's going to actually be worth a shit.
Hmm.
Yeah, it's crazy how far stuff's come. Like I watched TRC's video there the other day with that F-150 that they got there. He put the FFRE motor in it, twin turbos. Like it's still got like stock axles and all that sort of shit in it, but he's out making some passes with it. And I think the thing ran like an 850 or an 860. Like that's like a 4,200-pound truck, like 167 miles an hour, right? Like it's just
Ridiculous.
crazy the evolution
Yeah.
of this shit, right? Like I'm watching it and I'm like, this. It's so hard to comprehend, right? Like, and that's like, there's no bars in that thing. It's literally
Right.
a regular cab, short box pickup truck with a motor boost, and we're running
Mhm.
850s. We're going 167, 168 miles an hour in an F-150, right? Like,
It's wild. It's wild.
When I
It's
first
really
moved
thought,
to
right?
Chicago, it was I was doing some weird wiring jobs or just whatever to just generate some income, and I got hooked up with some grudge racers would bring me some cars to the house, and hey man, can you wire this? Hey, can you wire that? And this one car came in the house, and I'm looking at it, I'm like, and how fast is this thing? It's got a big ass turbo, an LS motor, and it was a nice LS motor. It had like nice heads on it. It had a lot of nice things. Anyhow, I wire the car or wire some things in, fix a couple little things, and when it came to pick it up, I'm like, all right, I got to ask, how fast does this thing go? And they're like, oh, it's fast. I'm like, okay, is it fast like 9 seconds fast? He's like, nah, man. I'm like, how fast is it? He goes, man, we've been 780s with this thing. This thing was a stock floor pan Mustang with a stock seat belt. A stock front seat,
Yeah.
no roll cage, no nothing. And the damn ABS for the brakes was dragging on the ground, the ABS unit, the big block, And they're like,
Yeah.
hey, man, can you take that off of there? I'm like, no, I am not touching that shit. But I mean, the power levels are easy to get to,
Mhm.
And this is a freaking, I think it was a, man, '04 Mustang,
Yeah.
I don't want to say what the name of the car was, but it cracked me up. I'll tell you later. But
Yeah.
it was because- but it was funny. It was really a funny deal. But yeah, these guys are a grudge car going 7 seconds with nothing in there. And yeah, I'm sure it twisted it up. I'm sure a lot of things happened, but they were doing it. But now, like what we used to think was a lot of power at 12 or 1500 horsepower, well, that ain't shit.
No,
It's not like it's
no.
easily attainable. And even like I said, the 3000 horsepower stuff, I can pick up the phone right now and have an engine sitting there tomorrow if I had enough money, and I can make 3500 horsepower all day long. And
Mhm.
where 20 years ago or 30 years ago, there's no freaking way that would happen. You know how
No.
much work you had to make you had to do to a big block Chevy to make 1,000 horsepower? Like, Jesus.
But the
But
old
anyhow,
generation will still sit here and try to tell you that those were the days, the muscle car days, right? The big blocks, and it's like, no, like really, like today, these are the
today's the day for
days. Like
sure. Yeah.
we're 1,000 horsepower on stock motors, right? Like,
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, I
I
see
mean,
it
don't
both
get
ways. I don't know. I respect because we get a lot of the old timers like that come into the shop and they'll tell
yeah,
you the glory days of building the old big blocks, and I could appreciate it because especially for my generation and the younger generation, these fucking guys got no respect for horsepower nowadays, man.
oh
These
no,
like
and I
no.
can
there's a
agree.
lot of
I can
guys
agree with that.
nowadays.
Yeah,
It's like,
I'm
go
just
get into
saying,
a
like
400
it's
horsepower
so
car.
easy now, right? Like it's a lot
Yeah.
easier now. Back then, like I talked to older friends of mine, and it's like basically like you just think go online and order a cam, right? Like you're pulling the cam
Mhm.
out, you're working it yourself, right? You're doing
Mhm.
like little modifications and porting stuff yourself, heads and all that sort of stuff. Like you couldn't just open a catalog and flip through and
Right.
a couple thousand here or there, boom, you're making 1,000. Like it took work, right? Like
Right.
That's what we're missing nowadays, though. I mean, that's why there's so much disrespect against like everybody talks shit and is like, I'm the baddest motherfucker. Well, your car has launch control, it shifts itself, somebody else tuned it, and you finance the car and everything's on a firm. You didn't do anything but sit in the car and drive it. And by driving it, all you did was go when you saw a light. And you see it online all the time where it's like, oh, well, if you're not making X amount of power, your car's slow. Half these guys will get themselves killed in a 300 horsepower BRZ. Like, they don't understand how, like, and I really do feel like nowadays, like, I wish we could go back in time where it's like, hey, the guy that thinks their Hellcat is the fastest thing ever, go work on a old 360, go work on an old small block 289, and go make 500 horsepower out of that, and tell me how nice it treats you, and then tell me your respect for 500 horsepower now.
Hmm.
It's
Yeah,
just wild, man.
we all grew up working on cars. We all worked, we that's just the background we had. I had an old 70 Impala, and I mean that car, it had a 300 horsepower crate motor in it from GM because the motor that was in it when I got it it was my older brother's car, and he got it from my grandfather. So I mean, it had some miles on it, and so anyhow, but I thought that thing was powerful as hell at 300, and then I was trying this or trying that or doing this and doing that to get a little out of it because it was running low 14s, and I thought, man, that thing is fast. It was one of the fastest cars at school. It's like, man, this is all right. Nowadays, shit, that's nothing. I mean,
it's
it's a
nothing.
boat. That is, it doesn't mean a shit. It doesn't mean a thing. With all this stuff that we were talking about with Ryan, I mean, my wife's damn Ford Explorer would outrun that car hands down. And I mean, it's just that's the technology we have nowadays. It's so easy to make the power. So, but at the same time, the people like you were saying, Jay, they don't know where the power comes from now. Like they
Mhm.
don't know what it is. Where 30 years ago, we knew where it came from. It was a lot of work to get there. So yeah, there is no respect for horsepower right now, and it sucks. But at the same time, that's the generation we're in. That's the era we're
Yeah.
in. Everybody wants instant gratification, and if it's not what you have or not what you need, or not, if you don't agree with it, well, fuck you. You know,
Yeah.
not so. I don't know. It's a wild deal.
Yeah.
Okay, I can't wait any longer. I got a question.
Oh
I've
shit!
been
Here we go.
waiting to ask Adam. All right, I need to know what your opinion is on long travel.
Oh, controversial. Here we go.
Controversial. Here we go.
I've been waiting. As soon as I heard that you were coming on, I'm like, I need to know Adam's opinion on long travel.
He didn't tell me this one beforehand.
Oh, that's all right. I'll be brutally honest. I think a little travel is good. More travel is better. Obscene amounts of travel, there is, obviously there's a need for it sometimes. I don't think it's everything. I could make a car work with a good amount of travel, but not like the 9-inch front travel that they have in some of these cars where it looks like a damn, dump truck going down the road with the front end up, or a Carolina squat. Yeah. Yeah. There you go. But so I'm not going to say it's not an advantage. I think it can be an advantage. But I think, a bag of dog shit in the backseat could be an advantage at some point, So it's all on how you use it. I don't think it's the end all cure all you have to make a car go fast. But I think it is a very good tool in the toolbox, put it to you that way. My biggest thing I tell some of my customers is, look, if you can get that crankshaft higher than the axle center line in the rear, so if you got a 30-inch tire on it, if you can get that crankshaft over 15 inches, you're doing something. Like, that's going to be ideal. Like, as long as you can get it over that, you're good. Do you have to get it 6 inches above it? Probably not. But getting it up above it will help.
That's good.
So,
yeah, it's tough because I'm not sold on it, because I've seen cars with no travel get down on bad surfaces, and I've seen the cars with long travel. So it's just, it's always been tough for me, because I've wanted to go the long travel route, but it's like, do I need to? Because, you see guys that are getting down without it. I've gotten by without it so far. Like, yeah, it's just, it's tough for me to decide if I need it or not. I will say,
in a limited grip application, it's better to have more. It's better to have more than not needed. On a prepped racetrack, probably not necessary. But it goes back to everything that we were talking about earlier, comparing race cars to street cars, or purpose-built cars to a street car. Years and years ago, we had struts on our cars that had obscene amounts of travel on our pro stock cars. And everybody was limiting their travel down. Back in this era of pro stock, we had, basically a half an inch from ride height. The thing would go up a half an inch, and that was it. Well, we had struts that had quite a bit more travel in them, but we would space the travel out of them internally. And we were testing, and we were having a hard time getting through the middle of the racetrack. And I'm like, man, what if we just get the front end up a little higher through there? I think that would outweigh the aero disadvantage it'd have in the back half if we can get from 60 to 330 faster. So we went in there and pulled some shit, pulled some spacers out of that strut, put it back together, and went out and made a run. And it picked up like 300ths to the 330. And it was huge, and then so we kind of went down that road, and yeah, everything's like, that's how we've been doing it. But I say that because when you're used to an inch of travel, 3 inches of travel is a ton. Like, that's 3 times, twice, or 3 times more than you had. Okay, so great. But these guys on a street car, you guys have 4 inches of travel stock, maybe, so you can get it up to 4 inches. Well, going to 8 inches is only doubling your travel. And I say that only doubling, but comparing percentages to what you're doing, like, it's not that big of a difference compared to, like I said, the pro stock, where we had an inch of travel max and we just put 3 inches in it. So that's kind of how I see it, is having those cars have plenty of travel in them to start with. Normally a street car does, and giving it more is an advantage, but it's not as big of an advantage as it would be to put double or triple the throw in in a race car. So
Yeah, I guess it's a
that's
good time to talk about the Afcos because that's so we're doing buddy of mine, Daniel with his ZL1. He just purchased a set of Afcos that we're gonna be building for him, and he wanted the long travel option. He wants to do long travel, so we are gonna set him up with a long travel deal. But as I discussed with him with the Afcos, which is nice, is you can go from okay, say we're on a very subpar surface, let that thing loose, let that front end come up, and obviously the valving will do its job, keep the nose up, not compress back down, slam back down. But then say he gets on, a more prep surface. Well, now we can crank that valving down, and really tie that nose down. Because well, Adam, like you told me, with the adjustability of the Afcos versus some other options, you have a lot more adverse tuning window.
Yeah, you've got a bigger range of adjustment. So, if you have a strut that you can tie down and not let it extend, let's just say it extends an inch over 2 seconds. Well, you don't need limiters, and you don't need you don't have the travel obviously because it's only going to go up, inch and a half, 2 inches, and then the car's going to basically settle the nose down and start compressing again. And then you loosen the thing up, and you have 8 inches of travel available, or 7 inches, or whatever it is. Well, then you're going to get all that travel. So having the travel there is really nice because typically you don't need when you don't need the travel, you're not going to run the strut loose. You're going to have it tight, so it's not going to get there. And when you do need the travel, you're going to have the strut loose to get the car to rotate, and that travel will come in. That'll be a benefit to you through the middle. So yeah, the AFCO thing is going to be a good deal. It is it's a very nice product for the money. I'm not going to say that an AFCO strut is better than a Penske strut. It's just not. But that's not what they're for. They're not in that market. This Penske, we have our Penske struts with the options on them. They're $8,000 or $9,000. Well, no street car guy's going to put a set of those on their car. It doesn't justify itself. But the AFCO can do just about everything the Penske can do. It's just not as polished. It's not as precise, but it doesn't need to be precise for a street car.
But
Or
it might not,
for
yeah,
what we're
it
doing.
might not be someone for someone like Jay and I,
100%.
putting a Penske on a 9-second street car, right? Like,
Yeah. Guys do it. Don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
And if you want to do it, yeah, give me a call. We can set you up. But but it's just I really don't think it's necessary. But the AFCO thing is going to be great. Like that's going to be a really good benefit to us. Our long story short on the AFCO thing is my Penske distributor that I always dealt with was Eric Davis in Michigan at the Competition Tire West store in Michigan. And they shut that store down a few months ago. And Penske basically made a really sweet deal with Eric to be a distributor for Penske. So he opened his own business and now he's a distributor for Penske. I still buy all my Penske parts through him. But that gave him the freedom to get some other brands in and explore some other options rather than exclusively being Penske, because that's what the store was a Penske store. So AFCO reached out to him and he went there and did the tour and they made him a really good deal. And so by default, we're AFCO dealers. And we learned a lot about the AFCO in that process. And I mean, I'm not gonna lie. I turned my nose up at AFCO stuff before because A, I didn't want to deal with it, but B, I didn't. I don't know. It was a cheap shock. Like I didn't need that shit. Like I had Penske stuff or JRIs or whatever we had. Well, now that we have the AFCO and you look at it, it's like you know what? That is actually a really nice product, and the people at AFCO are awesome to work with. So it's going to be a good deal. It's going to be a really good deal. You look at what Mark Menzer does with the AFCO stuff. Mark made that AFCO into something really nice, and he took a product that was good, but not at a premier level, I guess, and he has made that into a really nice piece. And now I think the for the public, like the stigma of an AFCO isn't really there. People see the AFCO as a high dollar shock these days because of what Mark's done, really, and a lot of other guys too. But they've definitely elevated AFCO, I think. So I'm just happy to be on board with it now, and it's going to help us all. Like it's really going to help us all.
Yeah, Absolutely. And for a lot of the streetcar guys out there, again, and this is by no means, I'm not taking a dig at anybody's product, but I want a lot of streetcar guys watching this to do the education of go look at what a Viking Crusader costs. And I'm not saying that is a bad shock. It has a place just like every other shock, a Strange, an Afco, a Penske. It has its place, it has its usage. But a Viking Crusader for say an S197 is about $489. A Afco, which has a massive tuning window, is about $529. And these are both retail prices, and they both have their what they're good at. They both have their pros and cons. They both have obviously again a little bit of a price difference, but what you're getting for a little bit more money as far as that tuning window and rebuildable, serviceable, and you're able to customize it. I'm just saying for a lot of the streetcar guys, if you're looking for that extra competitive edge, I firmly, now that I'm working on them, I could see even myself. I have Vikings on my car. They're great. They've done great for me. But I will say that if you're really trying to get that extra competitive edge, it's worth spending that extra $40, $50 to get something a little bit more competitive, especially if you're doing backside no prep. A lot of frontside no prep, your street strip guys, heavy prep stuff, it all works. Strange will work, Afcos will work, Vikings will work, shit, even QA1s will work. When you get more into the more tedious things like backside racing, it's not bad to spend that extra little bit of money to have something that's more tailored to what you have going on. And again, it just comes back to what you know, the low-hanging fruit. A lot of the streetcar guys are not familiar with Afcos. And I think that's really what we're aiming to do is kind of bring that knowledge of like, hey, Afco is an option for you guys as well. Don't feel that the only option you have is a Viking or you spend all the money and go to a Penske. There is middle ground as well. There are other options. I mean, we've even done trick stuff with Strange. And Strange, for a lot of guys too, the stigma with them is, oh, well, this is just the regular bolt-on shock. This is just like a little bit better than stock. No, there's stuff we could do with even with Strange stuff. And it's very nice on the pocket.
Yeah, it is. And the Strange, I rebuild a lot of Strange struts. Don't do so much shocks, but the Strange struts, I've done a ton of them. I mean, hundreds and hundreds of sets of them. They are very good. That's a production-minded strut. Like those parts are very production-minded. They are inexpensive. They're inexpensive to fix. They're inexpensive to valve. But efficient as far as valving goes, I would say they lack a lot of the Afco stuff compared to the Viking or whatever. It's a different design shock, but most of these don't have different pistons that you can tailor a different dampening curve to, where the Afco is very similar to a Penske in that respect, where you can literally put a different piston in with different port sizes or a different port design to make the dampening curve different. And the Strange stuff, their twin tube stuff doesn't have that. And so there's places for all this stuff. The Vikings, I ran a car with Vikings on it. They worked well. I've ran a car with Afcos on it. They worked really well. But it's what you have. It's the tools in your toolbox that you have to work with is what makes the big difference. And I feel like the Afco stuff is a step above most. It's a really good bang for the buck shock.
And I think having more adjustability, just like you talked about, having the long travel, but being able to have that adjustability on compression rebound to, minimize using that full length and then using it when you need it, that's big. So from what I'm understanding, going from, Viking to Afco, you've got a lot more settings where you can, make more adjustments to benefit.
Sure. Yeah. And I'm not saying we couldn't make a Viking the same way. I'm just saying we can do it much more efficiently with an Afco.
And I think that might be the stigma too, because when I hear Afco, I've always thought like, oh, big money, right? Like,
yeah. Yeah, it's funny the different worlds we come from. I used to hear Afco and go, we don't need that's cheap shit. Like we don't run that, But and honestly, that's exactly what I thought until I really started working with them in the last few months, and it's like, wow, they're actually the stuff is pretty damn nice, and this simplistic way they do things. Honestly, my biggest stigma with it all, and it's going to sound bad, but the twin tube Afco stuff has a plastic bag in them. There is a plastic bag around the inside, the inner tube of the shock. And I'm like, who would put a plastic bag in anything having to do with the race car, and that just blew my mind. Well, it's because I was stupid. The damn thing's actually, that plastic bag is genius. It's robust. It does what it does, and it forces fluid where it needs to go, because when pressure builds up in it and the fluid tries to move up into the bag, well, the bag takes up area. So it's like, shit. I was making fun of this thing, and actually, it's genius. It really is. And Afco's not the only one to have a plastic bag in them. I think some of the older QA ones, and what was the other shock? Whatever. Dang it, now I can't think of it. But they've got plastic bags in them too. But that was my stuck upness saying, this is junk. Who would put a plastic bag inside of a damn race shock? Well, they did, and it ended up. Now I see it. I'm like, I'm an asshole. I'm such an asshole.
Well, I'd have to think
But
too, doing what you guys are doing, Chicago Connection there, you're dealing with a lot of, average dudes too, right? So
yeah,
in most cases, those guys aren't going to be able to swing a Penske shock, right? So an Afco would
no,
probably be, better performing for you guys, selling that to the average Joe. Rich would be
yep,
probably, I don't know what percent
yeah,
of
definitely
your
the
customer base, but
demographic.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, the demographic definitely works in our advantage. We're a
Yeah.
neighborhood speed shop, is what we are. So these people come in and they want to, they see our Penske stuff laying on the counter that are getting shipped out. They're like, "Whoa, that's so cool!" And I'm like, "Yeah, it is really neat. It's very efficient. They're a nice shock." Like, and everybody always asks, "Well, how much are those?" Like, this pair? Oh, they're $3,500. Holy shit! Somebody spends $3,500 on a pair of shocks. It's like, yeah, that's just, it's relative. It's a hundred
Yeah.
and eighty
He
thousand dollar
makes
car,
he makes
you know.
$350,000 and you make 35,000, right? That's
Right, right. And it's
yeah,
it's all relative. So you got to get in where you fit in, and yeah,
yeah.
the AFCO thing is a really good deal for us. So it'll all work out well.
Yeah,
And
the
I think
big
that's
thing
a
with
big
the
part of it
Afcos
too.
is,
Is
oh,
oh,
go,
sorry to cut you
sorry.
off, Jay. Just
Oh,
a big
well,
thing of it too. I think is that knowing what you're doing and adjusting it, and because
Mhm.
like you said, you hand a guy a Penske shock, or you could hand a guy, your baseline. I don't know what your cheapest dual adjustable shock would be, but if the guy's got no idea what he's doing on the Penske shock, that guy running that price point shock is probably gonna even a guy with a 90-10, right? Like if
Yeah,
you
yeah,
don't know what you're
yeah,
doing with your suspension and don't know what you're doing with everything, because I've seen guys with 90-10s get down too, right? Like
absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. And that's exactly what I had a guy. I don't know, probably 7 or 8 years ago now. A friend of my father-in-law's, he came to me. He says he needs a pair of shocks. I'm like, no problem. What do you think? And he goes, well, this guy's got lots of money, but he's a hard-headed guy and he does things his own way. But he heard all about these shocks, and like, he wants to try a pair. It's like, great, here, I'll sell you this pair. Sold him an entry-level set of Penske 7500s. For what he was doing, more than enough. But obviously, there's better. But I just didn't feel like he needed better. Like, I figured this would fit the bill a lot. Well, he's a Coney guy. Coneys are again a good shock, but they have their limitations, mostly from servicing. Like, people run them a lot, and they have their issues. Anyhow, so his thing is, the Coney's the best shock that's ever been around. Like, the Coney is the best thing ever, and it's a great shock. We built race cars around Coney shocks for years because that's all we really had. Well, he bolted these Penske's on his car, and the thing wouldn't go 2 feet. And I said, well, did you put the four link, with the diagram like I sold you? Or when I sold you the shocks, I gave you a little diagram, set the four link to a baseline like this, and that shock will work well for you. And he said, well, no, that's not going to work. I run my car like this, and these shocks are junk. These things don't work. Fuck this, fuck that. I'm like, okay. And you know what? He put his conies back on, and everything worked out for him. And I said, I'll buy those back from you if you want. Like, I don't want you to think I've screwed you in any way. And he's like, no, 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 don't worry, don't worry. So, like you said, you can put a really nice pair of shocks in a guy's hand that doesn't know what he's doing with them, and it doesn't matter. Like, it just doesn't matter.
yeah, you guys hit the nail on the head. What I was thinking, what I was going to say, I was like, it's there's some guys too that'll buy the stuff, and it's way more than they're capable of knowing what to do with. Whereas sometimes the person buying it, the end user, may not need that because they don't have the want to learn it or need to learn it. So you might,
Hmm.
it's. I joke around, and I've said this to to a recent customer, you know, he was interested in Afcos, and I actually sold them on some Strangers. I'm like, sometimes giving somebody too much adjustability when you're not going to use it, it's like giving a monkey a live hand grenade. It's not a good idea, because then you may get lost in the weeds, and you're next thing you know, you're throwing all these settings, and the car is doing everything you don't want it to do, and you're like, man, fuck this, I'm taking these off. And it's like, or we could just throttle back. I understand this is your goal. You want a nice daily driver, maybe street strip it on the weekends. This is good. This is good. Like, it's not all, yes, money is nice. It's good to make money, but at the end goal too, it's also to make sure that we're giving the customer a good product that they're going to be happy with, that they're going to be able to learn with, service, and obviously not feel like, man, I spent money on shit that I didn't need, you know? I tell a lot of guys when they ask me about Afcos, or, you know, some guys that know we're doing the Penske stuff, some of my friends that are like, oh man, I want to get shocks for mine. What about Penske's? I'm like, again, the monkey argument about don't give a monkey a live grenade. And then when it comes back down to like the Afco deal with my buddy Danny, he's like, do you think I need long travel? You know, I really want long travel. I'm like, well, you know, it kind of comes back down to the firearm argument. It's better to have and not need than need and not have. If you want to have it and you think you're going to need it because you're doing a lot of virgin road, no prep stuff, absolutely. Let's do it. Better to have it in the toolbox. And if we don't need it, we'll lock that front end down and send down a prep surface, and you'll be fine. There's just definitely that window of like, you got to also know when the stopping point of like, hey, this person may not need that because they're going to get themselves into some trouble.
Yeah, but at the same time, you know, I always I like educating people. Like I like teaching people how to use their stuff. And the joy of a small town, you know, local speed shop is you can walk in the front door and say, "Hey, how do you, how does this work?" You know? And for the guys that want that, like I think that's the best thing ever.
Yep.
Educating somebody who doesn't know that the shop can do this, to have them do it. And then that opens up a whole nother doorway in their minds, like, oh my God, that can do that. Maybe I can do this, you know. So it gets somebody thinking, and that's a huge deal. So having the adjustability and the shock gets you to help somebody. You know, that's the biggest thing. You get out there and you help these people make their car better or just learn. And you're always going to have the people that are like, fuck these things. They suck. You know, they just suck. You can't make those things work. Okay, well, you're not going to change those people's minds. But for the people that have an open mind that want to learn, like we're here to teach you. Like, sure,
Absolutely.
give us a call. You know, let's talk about it. Obviously, I'm not going to spend all day on the phone with you explaining four-link geometry or whatever. You know, but I'm going to lead you down the right path. We do it all the time. We do it all the time.
Yeah. I've
Well,
seen
that's
many
ultimately
times.
your goal, right? To give them the support to get their car working, right? That's what you
Yeah.
want. You don't want to sell a guy a shock and it not work for him, right? So because
Yep.
he's not,
Yep.
at that point he's not gonna tell his buddy to call Adam and Jay for shocks, right? So ideally, I'm sure your
But
goal is to get that shock working.
right, but having Jay with me is like a huge godsend, because I'm going to be the first one to admit I suck at communicating. I am the world's worst communicator, and I hate talking on the phone. I really do. I hate. I'm not. I just don't like it. You know.
Yeah.
I when I get into something, I'm all for it. But getting the will to pick the phone up and call somebody, it's like, that's like one of the most exhausting things to me, is to do that. So having Jay around,
There you go.
it's good because he can field a lot of these phone calls, and I can teach him, and so I don't have to field the phone calls, and I can be a little more in the background and let him do it. But yeah, my my want to help people definitely outcomes or overcomes the not wanting to talk to people, I guess.
Yeah.
So I'm in a weird dynamic there. It's just
Yeah.
probably I rode the short bus to school, so you know it's kind of why.
Well, I think it's probably tough too for some people because just having that conversation over the phone, it's a lot different than actually seeing everything work and seeing the chassis of the car, and you spend a lot of time going out with people like Kye Kelley and whatnot, and being there and seeing what's happening and making the changes live. Right? There's only so much you can do over a phone too, right?
Oh, I suck over the phone. I will tell you right now, I suck over the phone. I cannot stand it because you don't see the whole picture.
Yeah,
Even
you don't
when
know.
like when I couldn't make it, yeah, when I couldn't make it to the racetrack and Kai would do it himself and I would be on the phone and be like, all right, well, the car did this. Great. Yeah, it did do that. Right. The data says that. But the data says it, but the data is saying it because it was something else was happening. If I was there in person, I could see it. you don't miss things like that. So
No.
I envy remote tuners. I really do. Jay and I have talked about the HP tuners thing or this or that, and these guys are getting, $500 or $600 for a tune for a car. Man, I wish I could do that because that would be phenomenal. But I'm not that familiar with HP tuners or whatever. B, I suck over the phone remote tuning, and like I said, I hate communicate. Like communicating is my worst thing ever. So that's just not in the cards for this guy, I guess.
So I will be having gray hair very soon because there's a big
Oh, yeah.
thing moving forward that me and Adam are working on, but we're going to be getting Mr. Alejandro Flores set up with some Afcos for Section 8. And he's another one that, he doesn't like to do the phone thing. And I'm just going to be sitting there and I'm going to be having gray hairs within a week. We're dialing that car in. I'm going to be sitting here like, oh my God, I'm dealing with Alex on Patreon. I'm like, Adam doesn't answer. I'm freaking out. It'll be a good time.
Sure.
You guys know when I'm gray.
Yeah, that might be one of those things we just take a trip. We just do it that way, get everything ironed out. But yeah,
that'll be a fun one. That's a big one because he's got the obviously the Magnuson on the new Magnuson, the twin throttle body on the Coyote Swap GT500, and it seems like a big culmination of a lot of passion projects. And a guy like him, I mean, you look at his channel, and a lot of guys can see that he goes through it. He does have some bad luck sometimes, and when you have all the right minds coming together on one project, man, some good things happen. So. Hopefully we'll be able to get those out to him and have some good success with Section 8 running our AFCOs, and hopefully he could go out and run a number, and that'll be a good test to our product and what we bring to the table for sure.
Definitely.
And then when
I got
Chris feels
yeah. When I decide to go long travel.
Oh God, here we go. Fucking guy.
Now, I got to get your opinion on something else, Adam. I've heard a lot out there too with when you are adjusting shocks. Should you be adjusting them from full tight or from full loose, or does it really matter?
Ultimately, it doesn't matter. Whatever you do to track your adjustments is what you need to do. So there are instances that certain shocks we do certain things with. Like example, our Penske 8760, our triple adjustable shock. It has two compression adjustments. It's got a high speed and a low speed. The low speed I do from full tight because the full tight has a positive stop. It goes down and buries a needle in a jet, and that's it. The high speed I do from full loose for the same reason. It has a positive stop on full loose. On full tight, you can muscle a couple more clicks out of the thing. So, it's like, is it really 4 clicks or is that 5 or maybe even 6 from full tight, So the biggest thing I tell people is whatever you feel comfortable with that has a positive stop, that's where you adjust it from. Which most things is full tight. But like I said, that the compression, the high speed compression on an 8760 is a preload adjustment. And so when you go full loose, there's zero preload on the shim stack. And it's an easy adjustment to feel like it stops. And that's it. That's a baseline. So it makes in the end, it makes no difference as long as the one adjusting it knows what, where it feels or what it is or how many clicks. Because like I said, even some of this stuff like we do on sweeps, like, all right, you put the pin in the little eyelet, in the window and you sweep it over. Well, when you get to full tight, it's kind of a half a sweep. There's not a full sweep. So are you counting that as one or are you counting that as a half? Like what, so as long as you know what you're doing and you've documented it and you are consistently doing the same thing, it makes fuck all difference. So.
Yeah, because that was very confusing for me at first. Because I had one friend tell me it's always got to be from full tight, but then if like with my Vikings, when you read the manufacturer's suggestion, it's to do it from full loose. But then then someone else shows you another manufacturer's shock, and it's from full tight, right? So in my mind, I had the same idea with it as you do. As long as you know which way you're adjusting it from, and figure that's the way you're going to do it every time, and you get what works, then it's no different.
So our Penske stuff, and this has been this way for a million years. Like, if you're going from full tight, we document it as a minus adjustment. So if you're, let's say you're going from five of off of full tight on a low speed adjustment, it's -5. But if you're going from full loose, it's a plus adjustment. So like
Yeah.
our baseline setting on a Penske triple adjustable is on compression, it's +8, -12. And that basically puts you right in the middle of both adjustment range. But the +8 is the high speed because it's from full loose, and then the -12 is the low speed because it's from full tight. So that's how I always try and document everything: is a minus or a plus, and then if it's plus, we know it's full loose. If it's minus, we know it's full tight. So if you ever look at somebody's stuff or notes and see that, that's sort of what that's all about. But it's also a good way to document things.
Have you heard of shocks being the opposite, where if you turn them to the left, it's tight? And
Definitely.
okay, so that that was the first, and yeah, a friend of mine, that happened this year when we were at Take or Die. He turned them the one way as another buddy's car, and it did the opposite of what he was trying to do, and that was the first time I'd ever heard of that. So
yeah, so
that's interesting.
most of the time when that happened, or the best example of that, I guess, is like a Coney style shock. It is a rod that goes down into the shaft. It's a metering rod, they call it, but it's not really a metering rod. It's an adjustment rod, but it goes down and it has like a T-bar at the end of that rod, and that is on a spring seat basically that's threaded. And when you turn that adjuster, it tightens the spring up against a plate, and that's what provides preload for the fluid to try and move the plate out of the way. So if you're on the top of the thing and you're swinging it, let's just say if you're looking straight down on it, like a strange strut or a lamb strut, or a lot of different style struts, you turn it counterclockwise, you're pulling a spring seat up closer to you because it's threaded into the end of the shaft. So you turn it and that spring seat comes up and tightens the spring up, and then it stops. So to turning it to the left is threading that thing into the shaft and making the thing tighter. So if somebody could see it, maybe sometime we'll do this. We'll drag some parts out, and like I'll show you the reason why that is. It's once you see it, it's really easy to understand because you're moving a spring seat. But when you're at the racetrack, it doesn't make any sense.
No.
You're just not thinking about it. You're like, well, you should be tightening it, should be threading it in. Well, yeah, but you're not threading it into the shaft at all. Well, you are, but you're doing it from the opposite end. And the movement to do that is going backwards on the top of it. So
there you go, Jay. There's some content for you.
Yeah, that's actually not a bad idea.
There's a video for you to make.
Bring some of that to my channel. That wouldn't be bad.
Yeah, definitely.
Actually, that got me thinking now.
We got to do that.
I was going to say, I think that should be maybe this week. I'll have to bring in some equipment, and we can get some video going on rebuilding. Well, I know we got a busy week with Pro Stock and obviously a couple of other projects, but definitely when we get another set in, I think it wouldn't be bad. Maybe when we're doing Daniel's or Alex's set, we'll get a video of doing the Afcos at least, and kind of show how we go about everything. Wouldn't be bad. Little shock refresher.
Yeah, but, you don't like to show a lot of people these things because so people don't know how easy this shit is.
Yeah,
because if you show them how easy it is, they're gonna do it themselves.
There'll be a lot of editing.
Honest to God, so a while back, there was some shit going around on Facebook. It's probably 10 years ago, and it was all like, this guy's shocks are better, and that guy's shocks are better, and fuck that guy, do this and do that. And I'm like, I want to do a YouTube series or something and just like educate people on how to do this, because it is, when you boil it down, it's the dumbest shit ever. It's so simple, but there's so many moving parts. Well, not so many moving parts to it, but like just to assemble a shock or revalve a shock, it's stupid simple. Like it is all about bending, like in a Penske or an Afco, it is all about bending shims out of the way with fluid force is what it is. So you put thicker shims or more shims, it's going to bend, it's going to take more force to bend the damn things out of the way. Or you preload them more, you bend the shims down so they've got more preload on them. It's going to take more pressure to push them out of the way. Smaller orifices, it takes more pressure for the fluid to go through a smaller orifice to bend that shim out of the way. It's like, this stuff is not rocket science. It is precision simplicity is kind of how I put it, but it's pretty simple stuff. But obviously not building one from scratch. My ass isn't doing
Yeah.
that because could I do it? Probably. It'd be the crudest thing you'll ever see. It looked like it was drawn with crayons, but like it's just whatever. It's just it's the stuff isn't that. It's not this uh like earth shattering. Like it's like, oh my God, there's not fucking pixie dust and unicorn shit in there. It's just it's not that way. There is some stuff that I will tell you is the Penske and Nerder stuff is like it's unbelievable. But
Can get
the yeah.
complex with some of the stuff.
Oh yeah, ball screws and clutches and all kinds of things inside a shock and a piston and shims. I mean, those things are pretty damn amazing. But you're paying for all that. And application wise, street cars, most race cars, not even like, are they awesome? Hell yeah. Are they worth the money? Yeah, in the right application, they absolutely are. But for what we're doing, no. But yeah, we need to do that. We need to just throw some cameras up and start revalving some stuff and get oil all over us, and Jay can have a little pool in there or something.
A Diddy party.
Diddy party.
A Diddy party.
Yeah.
Oh Lord.
You have to upload that on a different site. I don't think that'll work on YouTube, but I'm sure there's a site out there that'll take that.
Only shafts. Let's go.
Yep.
Hey,
Only shafts.
Hey, send me the link. I'll watch. I'll support you. No.
Wow. I knew it was going to get raunchy at some point.
Yeah, well, hey, so just time. That's what happens when you have three guys sitting around doing nothing.
Well,
Bullshit.
I guess that would, since that's talking about potentially sticky things that would lead up to, I guess it's a good time to ask you about how do you feel about traction compounds? I know you've obviously, with tuning when you're doing Claude, and obviously trying to get that thing to go down a shitty road in Vegas, and I know there were some tricks there, but what's your take on that? Because I know, Chris, I don't know what you use specifically for traction compound, but I know you do a little puddle and go, and on myself, especially at the streetcar brawl, I've gotten to the point where it's like, give me a little bit of water and pretty much dry hop, and I'm good to go. How do you feel about different compounds, time, place, and kind of consistencies and things like that?
Yeah, it's years ago we used to mix all of our own stuff because really it was all LC7 and methanol really was the thing. We'd throw a little bit of like ATF in there just for a solvent, I think is the way it was. At least that's how it all worked in our heads. And or some MEK or something like that just to modify the tire a little bit. But our big thing was LC7 and methanol. And when we did it based on temperature and humidity. So if we had, if it was anyhow, long story short, we would do a lot of blending throughout the night. We never mixed more than we were going to use because the next day maybe it was going to be different. But nowadays, like there's so much of this stuff out there. And I think we were using that Skinny's secret sauce or something. And man, that shit worked really good. And then there was a couple other companies that we were using, and it was like, holy shit, yeah, that really works. Man, that really works. And so we kind of got away from doing all of our own stuff because that stuff worked a lot better, and I was watching, there was an ad for it on somebody's, and it's like saying something through like innovation through science. And I'm like, well, yeah, that makes a lot of sense because I can tell you why we did what we did. And it was a very simplistic approach to it, but I wasn't mixing compounds. I don't know what those chemicals do. So I think the shit that you get now that you can pour right out that is specific, designed to do what we're doing, this shit's pretty awesome. But again, it's a whole another side of the data and the logging to the whole thing is you got to know what you're doing. You got to track all those things, because one product might be better when it's here for us in the Midwest because we got a ton of humidity in the summertime. Well, going down to Vegas or Arizona, there's no humidity out there, and that product might not work as well because of it. So you got to track those things. But yeah,
that's the thing I don't like about it is when you mix it, right? I don't think that's good, right? Especially when you get to an event and one guy's got stripper glitter, one guy's got
really greasy
secret sauce or whatever, and some guy's got his own shit that he mixed up, and that's why I've always preferred the water burnout just because then it keeps it consistent.
Yeah, I guess it just depends on how many cars are there.
Yeah.
Like if there's a ton of cars and everybody's doing their own thing, man, you're kind of that's the guy on the starting line looking and going, all right, yeah, we're better or worse than we were last time. Um,
Yeah.
that's ultimately what it boils down to. But yeah, doing a water burnout over that stuff, sometimes that's just what you have to do. You got to stop putting product down because it just becomes the solvent comes out and this solvent doesn't react with that solvent or this product doesn't react with that product and you just end up with a gooey mess.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. I've been at some races. You're walking up just past the burnout pit, and it's like you're on ice.
Yeah.
With all the different shit mixed together, it's like
Exactly.
Slip and slide.
Yeah, that's why a lot of racetracks won't let you do that because they don't want all that shit on their racetrack. So
Yeah.
But-
And it's like I know too, like, I mean, this is my little secret that I'll make known, but it's nothing new. But like I'll sometimes I'll cheat it a little bit. Like if I know I'm gonna go, especially when it gets really hot, like July, August, I'm strictly water burnout, but I will, like, say I get a brand new set of Hoosier DL5s, I'll wipe them down with prep beforehand, like before I even put them on the wheels. I'll sit there, I'll wipe them down and let that shit just soak in. Put it on there wet and let it just soak, and then throw them on the tire, throw them on the wheels, put them on the car, load it on the trailer, and I go there, and that water burnout's plenty because all that shit's just cooked in the tire.
Mhm.
And I know that's I know a lot of old dirt track guys used to do that with the old VHT. I know they used to have their compounds and they'd sit there with the saran wrap and wrap the tire.
Saran wrap,
They'd sponge it all down, then wrap it there, and like, okay, cool. And it's like there's so many different things from different disciplines of racing that like it kind of all plays into what we do. I mean, look at
Mhm.
as much as I hate to use the car as an example because I think it's an absolute clusterfuck of a car, but Bones out in Texas you got that dirt track spoiler on the front and the turbos are mounted on the trunk. It's like the weight displacement, the downforce, the way he has that car set up, or a lot of guys doing now, like you've seen at Dig or Die, where they have this big ass wing, but it's connected to the axle. So as you're going, all that downforce is pressing onto the rear differential of the car. It's just crazy. It's different innovation. But again, these are all different, aerodynamics. I mean, the weird shit they're doing. I mean, from dirt track sprint cars, even I'm sure people watch Formula One on a Sunday and they're like, hey, you know what? That's a good idea. Let me go try this with my Fox body. And it may work. It's just crazy how much you can learn from all these different disciplines and different eras of racing where it's like, hey, you know what? That might work in my program. And hey, if it doesn't, well, whatever. But at least you're trying.
I think the statute of limitations on go-kart racing penalties is probably up from when I used to race them. But years and years ago, we ran 125 shifter carts, and we would get, we never did it to our slicks. I can't say that. I did a few times in like a winter series, but we go to these regional races basically, and you always had to buy new tires for every race, so you had to bring tires in the wrapper. But the ones that they would let you bring to multiple races because you didn't use them was your rain tires, and I always treated my rain tires, and I would do it from the inside. So I would mount them up, and I would put like whatever syringe through the valve stem, and put some things in it, and then fill them up with air. And I had a little rotisserie, and they would sit there and just roll. They would just roll and roll and roll. And they'd roll for 12 hours, and pretty soon that stuff was coming from the inside out. So the more they wore, the more prep they had in them, and it was all coming from the inside. And man, I was really freaking fast in the rain because they never checked any of that shit. And because nobody wanted to be out in the rain. So post race tech was non existent basically. And the tires, hell, I had those and they were specific wheels too because they were different widths. So yeah, those things, that was that discipline that racing, I learned some stuff. So we have done that with no prep stuff. We did it with pro stock cars too. Because a lighter tire is a faster tire, and so we'd take a 60 or 70 run tire in a pro stock car that weighed almost 10 pounds less than a new one, and then we would treat it from the inside, trying to bring the compound back to life and get grip in it. But I will say, in drag racing, when you treat tires like that, the the way the procedures we do. So doing a burnout, like you don't do a burnout in a stock car or a go-kart, so those tires come up to temperature slowly or quickly, whatever, but then they maintain that temperature for long periods, and then when the race is over they go down. Where we are burning the piss out of the tire, it's cooling down on the starting line, and then you're shocking it and going, and it heats up rapidly, and then the heat plateaus, hopefully, and then it's gone. So you're heat cycling the tires twice basically every time you go to the starting line. And I don't think the tire prep, like putting it right on, reacts the same in a drag racing application as it does in a dirt track or circle track or go-kart or whatever. So um, that's what we found in that stuff. But yeah, so down that whole different rabbit hole. Sorry.
Yeah.
That's all right. That's what we want, though.
Yeah.
We want to hear
Yeah.
your side of the stories.
Oh yeah.
I
But
got a lot of
I got a couple
bullshit
more.
running
I got
around
a
in
couple
my
more
head.
shock questions.
Yeah, man.
I want to fully utilize Adam while we got him here. So, another question on shocks that I had is, what are your thoughts and what have you seen with different shock adjustments from left to right? Have you seen variances there where you
Definitely.
guys or where you have made? Yeah. Okay.
Yeah, definitely. So I will say front, you're pretty much always going to run your left side a little tighter than your right side because of the
Mhm.
torque of the engine. Like it rolls over, So
Yeah.
typically, it's just how it works. You're gonna the right side's gonna come up fast, or the left side's gonna come up faster. The right side's gonna come down, come up slower. The compression on the right side, really, you can run a little tighter on the right side in the front, and whatever, because it's gonna come down on the right side first and try and make things even. You're really only gonna know those little crazy little details by having shock sensors, like travel sensors on the car. So the fronts, yeah, there's a little difference. The rears, it depends on the application more than anything. If you have a Pro Mod car with an extremely robust anti-roll bar in the thing, and the chassis is rigid, and the anti-roll bar is rigid, chances are you're not going to be staggering your shock settings, because the whole idea behind the anti-roll bar is keep everything square, keep the thing
Mhm.
squatting square, keep it extending square at the initial hit. You're not trying to drag the left side, extend the left side more than the right. You're trying to make things more even. Now, on an old super gas car that somebody decides that they're going to put a 900-inch nitrous motor in, yeah, you're going to be staggering those rear shocks a ton to try and get the thing to be more square because you have no structure in the chassis. And some guys do, and you see an advantage to it. Some guys don't, and they don't see any disadvantage to it. So it's all in the application. It's all in the setup. I think on a street car where the rear sway bar is your anti-roll bar, um, you're probably going to have to stagger some shocks around. You're going to run
Mhm.
the left side a little tighter on extension because it's going to drive the left side. It's going to rotate the left side down faster at the initial hit. Same with on the right compression. You might run a little more compression on the right side because of the torque of the engine. It's going to roll the car over, and that right
Yeah.
side theoretically should be squatting more than the left. So you might run a little bit more spring pressure or a little bit more compression on the right side. I've had race cars. I've had pro mod cars and pro stock cars. There wasn't not one spring on the four corners was the same rate. Um, did it work? Yeah, it worked. Was it necessary? Probably not. But when you're trying for everything, that's what you do. You do all the weird, crazy shit to try and make yourself better. So on a street car, that might be something that we explore later as we put a 125 on the right rear and 100 on the left rear. Um, just to see, like the old airbags and shit
Yeah.
they used to put on the on they put airbags on them for this reason because they didn't have sway bars in the back, so they were just trying to hold that right rear up.
The old Nerf
So
football and the Fox body
yeah,
passenger
absolutely.
side spring.
Yep.
Yeah, because I started playing around with that a bit. I have some different shock settings in the rear to overcome some things, and it seems to be working out all right. And I actually had that advice from a very seasoned racer that he's like, and he's got multiple race cars, and he goes, there's not one race car I have that has the same shock setting from side to side. because I was dealing with because we were filming one side versus the other side, and it was like I've got the anti-roll bar and everything, but the one side was not reacting the same way as the other side. So we made adjustments on that side to get them both doing the same thing. So I was curious if and that's.
But
did
you see a big performance advantage in it?
No, it was more just getting the tire to do the same thing on both sides.
Right.
Is really what it was, right?
Yeah. So I mean, I do this. We go down this road all the time. It's like, I'll talk to somebody and they say, hey, it's doing this and it's doing that, and this side looks way worse than the other. I said, okay, well, here's what you can do to make it look better. I said, but is it going to be a performance advantage? Are you going to go faster because of it? Well, sometimes they say yes, and sometimes they're like, it didn't really do shit. It looks nicer, but it didn't necessarily go faster. So, I mean, obviously, if it looks better and everything's even, theoretically, it should be better. You should be able to lean on it harder. You should be able to do a lot of things. But at the same time, getting it to work or getting it to look the same in the first 20 feet of the racetrack, how is that affecting you the last, the last 640 feet of it? Or 620 feet, whatever. Math is not my strong suit, obviously.
Well, actually, if I think back now, it was paddling the tire on the one side too, and that was some of the suspension or the shock changes felt that. Yeah.
Right. But I do have guys that, like I said, they do that and they're like, oh no, it didn't make any difference, but it looks better, but it's not any faster. Yeah. Okay. Well, good. Yeah. So, I mean, yeah. Do we have different shock adjustments? Absolutely. Is it critical to have different shock adjustments? No. I mean, it depends on what your car's doing. So
yeah, but there's nothing wrong with it if it works. I guess at the end of the day,
that's
if it works,
exactly
that's
right.
Really all that. Yep. That's what the ultimate goal is, to make it all work, right? So
absolutely, yeah. There is no set instruction manual for any of this shit.
No,
it's the way it is. So yeah, if it works, it's not wrong. Yeah.
And then the other question I had was, especially with the whole streetcar thing, is I guess this would be for race cars too. So when you're trailering your car or driving the car on the street, like what are your feelings on that? And what are your feelings on like how you should set your shock settings for street driving and trailering?
So I tell guys all the time with, I'll start with the Penske stuff. Our Penske stuff, well, 90% of the time you don't have to worry about it. Like, those things are so robust. They're designed. These things were designed to run on road race cars and things like that. Or a stock car running 500 miles. Like, they've got Teflon wear bands. They've got, everything is done to the point where they're designed to, be very robust. That being said, what does it hurt to put travel shocks on a car? Like, if you have a set of shocks, are right, and you want to protect them, we used to change the shocks. Before we left the racetrack, we'd put a set of travel shocks on, strange single adjustables, or just another set of shocks that weren't our race shocks, just so we knew that when we get to the racetrack, they were the way they were. But Afcos, I will say, are very similar to the Penske, where they have wear bands and things like that in them. A Strange has got a lot of metal on metal, and I would not like. I guess you could say you could tighten them all the way down so they don't move as much going down the road. But ultimately, the best thing to do is, there's two good things to do. Number one, air bladders. You put air bladders under the chassis and raise them up to hold the car while you're going down the road. But I go back to 20-something years ago when I had a Super Comp dragster. We would block the car up on the rear suspension. So I'd slide a 4x4, or it was a 6x6 actually, under the 4-link brackets, and then I would pick the car up a little bit and slide a 2x4 over the top of the 6x6, and it would sit down on it, and then I'd grab the parachute mount and I'd pull straight down to the floor with the parachute mount. So the thing couldn't go down and it couldn't go up, and the shocks never moved going down the road. And then we'd bladder up the middle of the race car, and that was how we traveled with it. When we were running pro stock, we did very similar stuff. Our pro mod cars, very similar stuff. So whatever you can do to limit the movement of the shock going down the road on the highway is best. Whether it's tightening the shock or blocking the car up, or air bladders. But that is where the shocks receive the most amount of abuse, is in the trailer, traveling down the highway. Because you're going a quarter mile at a time and then pulling it back or driving it back down the return road. the shocks don't get a workout from that. They get used, yeah, but they don't get a workout. You slide under a race car going down the road after a couple thousand miles, and I guarantee you those shocks are warm. Like
Yeah.
they are warm to the touch. They may even be hot, but it's a lot of abuse on them that's unnecessary. So, excuse me.
It's good to
But
know.
yeah, that's kind of how we do it.
And then like, so for the street car, like with like my car and Jay's, like what, like driving on the street, should you have it set up pretty loose, or should the same thing? Should you have it try to have it tighter, or?
Well, for my Nancy S, I'd have it really loose just so it rode nice, and you hit bumps and shit like that. Again, you're not going to kill the thing just driving around town unless you nail a pothole and bend your wheel up. I mean, that's going to be some collateral damage there. But honestly, around on the street, it's more for comfort. So loosen them up. It's not going to make any difference. So at the racetrack, have your settings and go do your thing. So that's what I would do.
So all the drag and drive guys, there you go. There's your answer. So
Yeah, well,
there's probably some of those guys in here.
Yeah, we did some drag and drive stuff, and that's it. I just tell them slide under there, loosen everything up to go down the road. We were talking about those pneumatic spring perches, and you had one customer that had those on, and he would, instead of taking the shocks off, changing shocks and changing ride heights, we put those on all four corners. And when he went to go down the road, to drive it, he turned the air on to those bladders. The car raised up 4 inches, and he drove the damn thing down the road. Like, just went cruising. They get to the racetrack, flip the switch, the air would go out of him, and it's just like a low rider. He was in race trim, so it was pretty neat. Just did away with a lot of unnecessary work, from race mode to street mode.
Badass.
So, yeah. But adjustment wise, he just went under there and loosened them up.
Yeah.
That's good info. That's good info.
Well, that's what I do with my car. So it makes me more confident now that your opinion, that's the way to do it.
That's what I would do. I don't want to drive something that rides like shit. You're supposed to enjoy these things when you're driving them on the street. So obviously you don't want it to be a freaking plush box or nothing, but
I definitely missed that note because I hate my car driving down the street.
Yeah. We did some street rod stuff. This is probably 5 or 10 years ago now. The guy wanted something that would handle when he wanted it to handle, and then ride nice when he was just cruising down the road. So we put 4 Penske's on the things with air eyelets on them, and we put a switch on the dash, and you flip the switch and it goes to the air on settings. So it tightened the rebound down, and we had open jets inside them, so it would tighten rebound and compression. And man, the thing was it was stiff, it was nice, it was responsive. You could corner well, and then when you wanted to travel, you flip the switch on the dash back to travel, and that thing was like a Cadillac. It would just float down the road. And the guy was so spun out about it. He's like, I cannot believe that it's that simple. I'm like, well, it's simple to a point, but yeah, that's what we do. And he's like, man, that's freaking awesome. So we've done a few street ride guys like that, but I actually had a Mustang customer that was in a similar situation. He wanted it to be it wasn't really a drag car, but it was a it was he wanted it to handle, but he wanted it to ride nice. And I'm like, well, simple air eyelets, man. It's like, okay, that's great. So we did, and he loves it.
Well, that was always the thing back in the day. You put the lowering springs in, and we really didn't know much about spring rate back then, and you put them in, and it's like, holy shit, this thing tries to bang, 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 bang. Oh yeah, right. You can see like 700 pounds per inch or whatever, and it's just beat the hell out of you down the road.
Right.
So don't cut your springs, Honda guys.
Yeah. Well, I've cut springs in the past.
Oh, I know.
We all have. Cut them, heated them up red hot.
Heated them, yeah.
Oh yeah. Yep.
See, I didn't have a childhood apparently.
Yeah, apparently not. Man, I got in trouble huge in auto shop one time because I went to lower my car, and I heated the springs up, and I lowered it down, and then they wouldn't let me leave with it. I had to buy new springs because it said it was a liability. I was like, man, that sucks. Oh yeah. It was you grow up in Seattle area, everybody's I'll stop there.
Oh, that's sweet. Well, that answers all my questions that I had. That's awesome. I don't know if Jay, if you got some questions or anything you want to add.
honestly, I'm either going to bother him during the work week, or I'm going to be completely brain dead and think about it at 3 in the morning and be like, damn, I'm going to ask
Yeah.
him Monday.
Well,
Because now my brain's going. Now I'm like, there's a lot of things I need to try as well.
so I got a question for you guys.
Uh,
What do you guys think? Like, I ask a lot of people this when especially when it's like a new customer, like, what do you think is holding you back? Like, what's holding you back from going faster with your car? What do you think your downfalls are right now?
Chris, you can go first. I don't want to
Finances.
put myself.
Finances? Yeah. But I mean, even if you had unlimited finances, like what do you feel like is the low hanging fruit that you have right now?
That's stopping me from going fast.
Other than the obvious horsepower, like that's everybody could use more power, but
That's a good question, because like all I could think of is just money. Because I feel like if you got money, you can go fast. Right?
sure, yeah.
Oh, what
Me
do
and
you
Chris
think,
are
Jake?
having a little. We're having a little Mexican standoff right now. I'm gonna let you out yourself before I out myself. I
Yeah,
know.
like
I mean, for me, it's again. A lot of the guys I race against, so they have generations of racers in their family, and they have the crew, they have the help behind them, and the family behind them. Or as compared to me, it's pretty much just me and my girlfriend, and it's kind of just we're figuring out as we go. And I
Mhm.
think that's the biggest thing that's holding me back is the knowledge, which obviously now I'm learning a lot. And I feel like my car could be a lot nicer, to say the least. I know the safety I haven't cheaped out on. I do have nice suspension components, but there's a lot of things that can be upgraded. I feel like the chassis is really what holds me back. I mean, I still got a stock K member in my car. I still got stock rear brakes. Yeah, the rear end's built, but like the chassis is not set up for what I'm doing. The weight distribution's probably shit. I mean, I can only tell you what the car weighs on a cat scale and front and rear, bias, but I can't tell you exactly corner weights. As far as even setting up the chassis, I only know from again experience and watching other guys do it. And if like everybody, you don't know, you go to YouTube, right? Or you want to go really old school. I still, I mean, I'll put myself out there, I still go to the Yellow Bullet forums. There's guys from 10, 15 years ago that are
Yeah,
still, their posts are still up there. Like somebody might have had the same problem as me. I mean, there's a lot of things. Even the Chicago Garage, that's another old one from back in the Chicago grudge racing days when it was really good, and that's still active. And I'll hop on there every once in a while and try to just research as much as I can. But I really feel for me, it's if it wasn't horsepower or funds, which funds being the main one, it's the support system and the knowledge that's holding me back. If I'm very creative, I could adapt to very different situations where like, okay, if we got to drive the wheels off this car to go A to B, like I'm not scared. We're going to drive the hell out of it. Is it the safest thing? Absolutely not. It's very stupid, but I can adapt to the surface and my driving styles. But to have the knowledge of like how to read a track, how to set up my car for each scenario, I'm lacking that. And that's just, again, I don't have the experience. I'm green in that aspect. And then, it's when we go out racing, it's kind of a shit show because, we got my girl recording, but also prepping for me and lining me up. And, I'm sitting here and thinking in my head, like, man, I got to make sure she's 100% because if I don't want to be aiming at the curb, I don't want to be, you know, backed up in my puddle. She can only do so much. So it gets
mhm.
a little scary. But for me, that I would think would be my biggest limiting factors.
Sweet. Think anything,
yeah.
Chris?
Well, now that he's gone, and really we got a minute there to
Bastard.
think. And
Yeah.
another thing for me would be just not want to lose the streetability of the car and the
Okay.
drivability, right? So I could go a lot faster if I could start getting rid of 50-pound seats, but it's like I don't want to give that up, right? There's
Yeah.
the street comforts that I'm just not willing to give up, and that definitely limits limits me from
Sure.
going faster.
Yeah. See, I've asked people this. I enjoy asking people that because, like we talked about before, sometimes you just don't know what you don't know. And
Yeah.
I had a customer last year with a small tire, no prep car, calls the shop out of the blue. starts talking to me like I should know who he is. And I mean, I was like, "Man, I'm sorry, I don't know you. Like I'm terrible with names, and like I'm just not from around the Chicago area. So these local guys call you, and I just don't know them. So anyhow, he starts telling me about how fast he is and all this, and I was just stopped him. I'm like, all right, dude. So what's holding you back? He's like, what do you mean? And I'm like, what do you think you need to go faster? Because like from the cars I've worked on, you're like 3/4 off. He's like, what? He's like, yeah, that's you're not there yet. So what do you think you need to go faster? Because I can suggest things to you all the time, like all over the place, but I want to know from you, what do you think? And it was the same thing you did, Chris. He just stopped and he's going, man, never
It's
really
a good
thought
question.
about that.
It's,
It's
yeah.
like, huh, okay. And it just all boils down to, you just don't know what you don't know. You know, people think that, this guy's a genius or that guy's a genius or whatever. It's just, they've been around this stuff enough to where they can look at a race car and say, well, you're lacking this or lacking that. So
Mhm.
I just make sure everybody knows that just because you don't know what it is to make yourself go faster doesn't mean you're an idiot. It's just because
Yeah.
you just don't know. Like you don't go to a freaking plumber and you ask the plumber like, why is this pipe leaking? Well, no, the plumber knows why the freaking pipe's leaking or why your drain's not draining.
Mhm.
But if you ask the same question about plumbing to a freaking mechanic, they're gonna like, fuck, I don't know, ask the plumber. I mean,
No,
what the
exactly.
fuck? Yeah.
And
So
if you don't ask, you won't know on the same
exactly.
aspect, right? So
Exactly. So I tell people that all the time. Always be thinking about like what is the limiting factor that you have, and work on that. That's what
yeah,
it's about. Work on the things that you think are holding you back. And a lot of times, in the same breath, the things you think are holding you back are not holding you back at all. There's so much other things that you could be doing to make yourself faster that you're just not there yet.
yeah.
You haven't thought about it. So it's just all
Sometimes it
one
can just
big
be
mind
you
game.
holding you back, right?
100, yes. And most times it is. Like
It is, yeah,
the car doesn't know it's wrong or right. It's just doing what you're telling it to do.
yeah.
So if you're telling it to do the wrong shit, of course it's not going to be right.
Man, that
So
self-reflection hurt a little bit. I'm gonna like cry myself to
sorry.
sleep tonight.
I know.
Sorry.
It's like, what's wrong with me? Every
Well,
day.
you
All
were
the therapy,
you
all
were
the therapy I've
you were
been
getting
to,
you were getting deep, Jay. I didn't know how far you were going to
yeah.
go with that. I thought it was going to be 30 minutes, and you were going to start getting right down and
No,
dirty, and
dude,
everything.
we're about another 10 minutes. I was gonna start busting out the slurs next. I mean,
Oh man.
Nice.
Well, it looks like we're rolling on that 2 hour mark there, so I guess we'll get it wrapped up. Very much appreciate you being on, Adam.
Yeah, man, no
Very
problem.
informative, and
We got to do it again.
yeah, dude.
hell yeah.
Like,
Yeah, we'll make
yeah,
this maybe a little bit of a regular thing. We'll I don't know. Like I said, Jay, we got to get we got to take some shocks apart and just let people see what they are. And like Chris, what you were saying about the adjusting from full tight to full loose, like we could explain that so much more in depth if we had some parts to show. So next
yeah.
time maybe we'll do that.
I think you guys should definitely
That's a
do
kick-ass
that.
idea.
You have great opportunity at the shop with the dyno and everything right there and all the tools, and you can just showcase that stuff because that's great information, right? And I feel like this episode has brought a ton of good information to the public.
Sweet.
Hell
Sweet.
yeah.
I'm glad some of this useless knowledge fumbling around in my head can
Yeah.
get blurted out and maybe help somebody.
You might think it's
Go, man.
useless, but if you don't know, you don't know, right?
Well, my other thing, what I tell everybody, like, look, we are not curing cancer here. This is just a fucking
This
drag
stuff.
race. So
Yeah.
no matter what we do, like none of this shit matters. So don't get too upset over this stuff.
No. I kind of use a similar line in the industry I'm in because I'm in heavy duty truck and trailer parts, right? And
Yep.
people can get all excited and upset over this weight part that gets back ordered, this and that. No different than your business, right? With the parts
Sure.
as well,
Yeah.
I'm sure, right? It's like, guess what? No one's dying, right? It's just a part,
Yes. Yeah.
But
Well,
then they'll come back and go, it's an ambulance, it's a fire truck that needs the part.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I guess
I'm
you
an
got
asshole.
me there. Yeah.
But yeah, it's wild, man. Like people get pretty spun out. And in your industry, at least that's somebody making their living, like
Yeah.
people don't drive heavy trucks back and forth to work or,
No. No.
it's for a purpose. But in our
Yeah,
stuff, this is nothing but fuck off money. Like this is your
Oh, yeah.
enjoyment. This is whatever. You're not Nothing about this is life or death.
Yeah, we don't make a living out of this.
No,
Those trucks and trailers, they generate revenue.
they
This
make a
doesn't.
shit ton more revenue than I make selling parts.
The shit we do loses revenue and lots of it, right?
Yep.
Oh man,
So-
that's great. Right. Again, thanks, Adam. Thanks,
No,
Jay.
thank
for
you,
teeing
guys.
this up.
Thank you.
I do want to mention you can get a hold of you guys, Chicago Connection, right? So I can put
Yep.
all the contact information down in the description below. So
Yeah, definitely. We got
shocks.
ChicagoSpeedParts.com is our website. There's nothing there but a
Website,
landing
too.
page. But if you need a contact info, you can email us, call us through there, whatever. But at least
Or call
there's
Jay.
something there for you to go to, or call Jay. Don't call me.
Yeah, call Jay.
Yeah. And we offer EFI tuning as well, not just
Yeah.
suspension and go fast parts. If you guys need Holly, Fuel Tech, I'm sure Hull Tech, pretty much anything under the sun,
Motec,
Adam knows
yeah,
how to do it.
whatever. And actually, what we did a couple weeks ago, a guy came in with one of those new Aces fuel injections. Asked if we could tune it. I'm like, let me look at the software. I've never even seen it. And I looked at it. I'm like, yeah, we could do that. About 30 minutes. It was a LS swap pickup that came in, and in 30 minutes, that thing was running and taking throttle. And the guy's like, oh my God. I'm like, it's just spreadsheets. Like, you got to make sure all the configuration is right and this is right. But yeah, so we can add Aces fuel injection to our list now. If anybody has any issues with that stuff, give us a call.
Hell yeah.
That's great. All right, guys, make sure you hit them up. Thanks for tuning in, and then we'll catch you on the next one.
Sounds good. Thanks, guys.
All right, boys.
Good night,
Take
guys.
care.
Take care.